Yeah, we're just going to highlight the big stuff, the big changes. I know that in years past, I've taught the classes where we went page by page for the offer to purchase and the listing agreement. And, we've taken several training sessions for that. That's not what this will be. It'll be a high level overview of those changes. We didn't have a lot of big changes last year, but we've had a lot of big changes this year, which I think after the 24 changes, 25, they were easy on us. 26, again, big changes. The decoupling, I think, is probably the biggest change for North Carolina and South Carolina, but this will only be North Carolina. If you have questions about South Carolina, you'll have to come one-on-one privately, but those changes took place in March. North Carolina didn't change till July 1st.
Yeah, and you should be used to in that by now.
In South Carolina by now, and if not, there's a couple of training videos out there that's really well.
Let me ask a quick question. You just give me thumbs up, or those of you that are on screen, or you're welcome to comment. How many of you guys watched the Mobile Mondays with John Waite, or the Forms Changes review with John Waite? There were two different ones he did. He did one on the Mobile Mondays Facebook group, and then he did one through the NC Realtors. We all had an email invitation to that. How many of you guys regularly watch those, or watch those in particular this year?
John's done it for the last 4 years.
I see some people have. That's great.
What's really sad about that is I looked yesterday on the YouTube channel, and only about 2,800 views of that particular video had been, and there's over 100,000 agents in the state. So people don't watch and take advantage of the North Carolina Realtors legal hotline and what they give to you. How many people read the legal Q&As that come out every Monday? They actually come out on the website.
I repost them every Monday.
They actually come out on the website on Fridays.
I see some thumbs up and some raised hands.
They get your email if you're signed up for emails. They get your email on Monday, and then we share those. I share it on Circle, or Barry shares it on Circle, and
and I'm trying to on the Facebook group as well.
But lots of learning opportunities there. So if you guys don't get the email, go and sign up for that on the North Carolina Realtor website so that you can get those emails on Mondays. And
I'll just start by saying this. I think it's critically important. Probably the most important thing that you'll ever do is be well versed, be a professional. And by being a professional, it means understanding these forms and these changes, and being able to, more importantly, being able to explain them, right? You got to be able to explain them to your clients and do in a way that sometimes you have to say it in a way that it doesn't concern them, right? Or you help them make sense of a particular rule or these forms. Because the worst thing you can do as a realtor is not know your job. And what is our job? We don't sell houses. What do? We facilitate. We facilitate through showing homes, guiding people through the process. We're facilitators to a transaction. Sometimes we're marriage counselors. I always laugh. We're a lot of things, right? But most importantly, they come to us because we're supposed to have knowledge, and we're supposed to be helping them. We understand the market. I doubt very seriously any of you guys aren't well versed. And when I did this pricing thing, I think maybe a month ago, I felt really good about you guys and understanding that y'all knew a lot about how to price and how to work with your buyers and your sellers, and understanding what a market dictates, right? Logan knows this, right? It's different in the lake versus the mountains. It's different in all different areas, and you have to kind of know that it's hyper local, and you guys know that. What concerns me sometimes as a broker, and Dawn, of course, as my COO, and of course Logan and the team, is that agents do not take their job seriously enough when it comes to the forms. And so we want you to take time to read these forms and understand the changes and why the changes occur. So we're just going to jump in and do that. And I'm going to let Dawn kind of take the lead. I'm going to offer commentary as needed. But you guys that don't know, Dawn has a long legal background. She was a closer, paralegal in many attorneys' offices over the years. She was an independent title searcher. She worked for multiple attorneys, and probably how many counties were you running at the time before it became all virtual? Yeah, 12 counties. I mean, 200 to 300 miles a day, hitting the courthouses when that's what they had to do. I jokingly say she's forgot more about real estate than most of us will ever learn, and I really do believe that. She is amazing, and I'm proud to have her not only as my wife but my partner. I'm gonna let Dawn get going. I'm going to just kind of accompany her with the screen share, and you guys feel free to put questions in chat if somebody would monitor that for me. I don't mind if you need to pop up with a question. I'd like for it to be open. We may just do some open discussion, but I'm going to just kind of start with Dawn. Is that okay? Everybody good? You ready to go? All right, let's get this party started.
For some of the agents that sat through some of the training and forms class before, I know a lot about the legal end of things, and I started in real estate at 16, and I'm 52 now.
Yeah.
And I started when the offer to purchase contract was one page, and the second page, the back page, was the guidelines on how to complete the first page. So I've done a lot of closings, and I've seen a lot of closings blow up. And so from that knowledge, I understand very clearly how important the paperwork is. So I stress to you guys a lot how important the paperwork is. It's not what you've said. It's what's in writing when you go before a judge. So, having the paperwork, this is why since 16 to age 52 now, our contract is the number of pages that it is, with multiple lawsuits and things that realtors have found themselves in the middle of, and the state and the commission has found themselves in the middle of over the years, and most recently the NAR litigation from 2024. This is why we are today where we are. I will say, though, that through the forms changes this year, the North Carolina Realtor Association, who in accordance and working with the commission and the North Carolina State Bar Association, have gave you a little bit of leeway with some blank spaces, but they took away all of our blank spaces a few years ago because realtors like to do a little thing called practicing law, which they're not allowed to write legal language. So, but they gave you a few little blank spaces. But if you watch John Waite's training, he still encourages you to be careful what you're using, be careful the leniency that you've been given with some of the forms, be careful when you're using blanks and what you're using them for, and different things like that. So I will say I have a favorite 4-letter word, and some of you know what that favorite 4-letter word is. And
we used to have a contest that people knew it. And
if you know what my favorite 4-letter word is, don't chime in just yet, but it is read. If you read most of the contracts, Brandon's smiling. I know why Brandon's smiling. If you read, that's my favorite 4-letter word. So if you have ever spoken with me about a question about a form, I most of the time have said, have you read the form for yourself? Because a lot of times it will answer many of your questions about it. And sometimes I will admit that some of the language is confusing. So even reading it once may not do the trick, and you may have to put a few good heads together, as Brandon Caputo and I have done many times in the past, and decide, what we're actually reading. But read is my favorite word. So I will start by saying, every year when we have forms changes, the best thing you can do is read the form. And I'm not saying every single form, but there's a handful of forms that you need to read every year, and that would be the offer to purchase, the listing agreement, your buyer agency compensation, now the 220 addendum, and you're working with real estate agents. Those are the things you're going to use repeatedly all the time. So reading will give you lots of knowledge. And if you read it for yourself, it is proven, you will retain 85% of what you read, versus if you listen to a training video, which is, we're all on here now, you're listening to me, you're going to retain about 50% of it. So reading will help you retain. I don't know how many of you guys have seen the new 220. How many of you have used the new 220? How many of you have attached it to the offer? Anybody?
Charity, looks like Charity has.
Okay, anybody else?
Anybody else? Did anybody have any like issues with it?
Who
Anybody
else?
want to chime in? Matthew.
Anybody? Okay.
Yeah.
Those of you that have used it, can you tell me how you added it to the offer to purchase? Okay, Matthew. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
If you don't mind, you
Unmute.
hit your button at the bottom. Maybe just the space bar will let you speak.
Yeah.
Here, maybe I can do it. No, I can't. I'm not in that. Sorry.
No. Can anyone unmute Matthew?
At the bottom of the screen. Are you on the phone, Matthew?
You might be, or you're on your computer. At the bottom of the computer, do you see a microphone? There you go.
I hear it. Oh.
Oh, nope.
Hold the space bar down and see if that works. No. Says he's unmuted, so it's something else.
So it's something else.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you, Keith.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, it's okay.
So sorry about that. I was wanting someone to chime in that had used it. So, unfortunately, the real estate commission and the forms committee did not add a blank. It would have been easier if we had all the little boxes under the addendum that they would have added the 220 as a space. According to John, it's coming. But for now, when you're adding it to the offer to purchase, you just have to check the attorney drafted or other party
the other
drafted
box.
addenda.
And then write it in.
Identify that addendum as being the 220 for the compensation that you're adding. But there's not a box to check. In South Carolina, you do have a box to check. North Carolina, you do not. So you have to check other and identify what that is. Be sure to identify it. But that will be coming. They will add that to it. I don't know why they didn't. But ironically, we've had a couple people say, okay, I have to add it. Where do I add it? Because there's not a box to check like the FHA addendum and different things. So just that's how we're adding it. That's probably the biggest question that we've gotten so far is how do I add it?
And just so you're clear, make sure you add it. It needs to be a part of the contract. It is a part of the contract now. It is a part of the transaction. So make sure that you add it. Make sure you check the box and write in form 220 until they give us that box. They give us that box in South Carolina, but they don't yet. And it's important that you do that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So that's how we add it. That's been our biggest question so far to date is how do we add it? Marissa, do you have a question?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Okay. So I just have a quick question on this, Dawn. And I was talking to you about one deal I was working on. And the agent was like, my seller's only offering 2%, like while we were like working on the offer. And obviously I have my clients all at 3%, and which is fine because my clients would obviously cover what the difference was. But he was trying to dictate what Form 220 could say and attached to the contract. Like he was like, my client's not even going to entertain an offer if your Form 220 is more than 2%. And I'm like, how are agents like handling those type of conversations? Because I feel like it's not the agent's call, it's the seller's call for what they're willing to like compensate if it's like now being attached to like the offers. And I know everything's a negotiation, but it was the like agent trying to tell me beforehand if I'm going to attach Form 220 that his seller's only offering 2%.
Yes.
He can be given that directive.
Mm-hmm. He can.
He can be given that directive if that directive is in writing from his seller or he is being given clear directive. Now, we don't know whether he has or has not.
Right.
I think that, and Logan, you're welcome to chime in on this if you want to. And Dawn, what are your thoughts? I mean, in essence,
just send what you want. I would just
send
treat
what
it
you
like
want.
personal property. You know, they're going to say, hey, we're not, we're taking the hot tub with us. Well, the buyers want it. Just send what you want.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's not his. That's what always got me messed up about the 220 when they first came out. They wanted the listing agents to put the compensation percentage on there and then force the buyer's agents into what it was going to say. I mean, that hasn't made sense for the last 2 years, and
Right.
certainly not the way I've been doing it for 2 years or instructing anybody else to do it for 2 years. So I think honestly now the Form 220 is exactly what I've been telling people to do for 2 years. Put on there what you want, which you should probably obviously be starting with what you have on your buyer's agent agreement, because that's, just makes the most common sense. But then obviously it's a term of the contract, just like anything else. So yeah, sellers have the ability to push back on that, and you're going to start to see more negotiating of compensation now that it is part of the contract, in my opinion. I mean, it has been happening for the last 2 years, but it's sort of been happening, off in a nether region somewhere. Whereas now it's going to be like, hey, you're going to get an email back from this guy saying, hey, they want the price changed to this, they want the due diligence changed to this, they want personal property changed to this, they want compensation changed to this. Like, it's all just going to be
it's all part of the negotiation.
That makes sense. I was asking because I didn't like how the agent was like basically dictating it before like we even put terms up. And I was like, I appreciate the transparency that his client's only offering this, but at the same time, my client, they're okay to pay me 3% and they would cover whatever difference. But I never tell a seller that, I'm like, I'm going in and I want the full thing for my client, so like they're essentially getting that compensated from the seller. It just he was really trying to dictate the terms prior to us sending, and I was like, well, that's bizarre.
I think that agents have to change their mindset around that, Marissa. We used to have it in MLS what your percentage was going to be, and there was no negotiating that.
Right.
So I think some agents still feel like you have more control over the commission and the percentage that's offered than maybe you necessarily do, because it's all the seller's decision, one, if they want to offer it, and two, what they're going to offer, right? You as the listing agent or anyone else as the listing agent can just give the seller the best advice they can give on what and if they offer anything and what that could mean to them when they get into negotiating the offer. I think what agents have to understand, just like Logan said, you guys are negotiating your commission just like you're negotiating the purchase price, just like you're negotiating the due diligence amount, just like you're negotiating personal property that will or will not remain. So when you're making your offer, it doesn't matter what that listing agent has told you. Add 3% onto this and push that offer. Just
like Logan said,
And
my question in tandem to that would be, I feel like all of us prior, we could see it in the MLS. Okay, great. And then it got taken out on the MLS, and then everybody would ask the questions. Well, what's the buyer agent compensation like before to go see the house?
Right.
Now I feel like we almost nixed that conversation, and it's like, we're just going to go see the house. And like you said, it's a negotiation nonetheless, like when you submit the offer.
You can still ask the question.
I still think people are asking. Logan,
still asking. Okay.
There's still people asking.
I'm going to ask.
In the listing agreement, it still speaks to what they may be willing to offer. You can still ask that. Here's the caveat to that. If you're going to ask Logan, I'm going to show your house 123 Main Street. If Logan has a listing agreement that says that they may offer 2.5% commission, then Logan's language back to Marissa should be, yes, with an acceptable offer, my clients are willing to pay a commission of X.
Sure.
So, but I think the disclosure should be maybe and with an acceptable offer. That doesn't mean you can come in $100,000 lower and Logan's clients are going to still pay you.
That depends, right? That depends.
Yes.
I mean, it just depends. And to Marissa's, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, but don't confuse if Logan's response is they didn't give him any right to say anything. Say, listen, you're just going to have to show the house, bring an acceptable offer, present a compensation, and we'll have to negotiate it, because they may have given him no authority to say anything.
Because they can. I mean, they could say zero in there, and they would have to negotiate. And you need to remind your people in the listing, if you're in the listing appointment and they get to that point and they say they want to check that box, you need to make them.
Hold on just a second.
Well, okay, I didn't want to do that yet, but
that's okay. Let's just show it where it's at.
Okay, well, all right, hold on, right here.
Right there,
All right, let me open that one. So real quickly, Marissa, how I would respond to that agent, and guys, working with agents back and forth, it's very important that you understand this. And I think this is something we all have to remember. Do you know what our code of ethics requires us to do when it comes to offers? Present all offers. We don't dictate. No matter whether we tell them ahead of time what our seller's willing to offer, if they give us an offer, we still have to present it. Now it may be wasting your time, and they may be very adamant about that. But like Logan said, present. It's not that you're going to make them mad. It's just that they have to present that offer. They may not want to waste their time, but they're required to present that offer. So just remind
the 220 was ridiculous before that. We were supposed to get it signed prior to making an offer. I said it 2 years ago. I'll say it again. It never made any sense to the seller, because the seller is going to say, I'm not agreeing to anything until I see what the rest of their terms are. So this gets us closer to where we should have been 2 years ago, when they just were in panic freak out mode about all these lawsuits. But this gets it to just a more sensible approach of where the contract is going to be. And Marissa, I'll just tie a bow on this and we can move on. That we're getting back to a point where the commission is going to be disclosed, and it probably will take another 2 years, but it'll eventually just be disclosed to everybody on every website, like I've been talking about for the last 5 years that it should have been. But we're eventually getting back to that, but then you'll still have this form. Therefore, if you want to change what is already being offered as compensation, you'll then use this form to put in whatever you want and make it part of the contract to negotiate. So yeah.
Sure. I mean, I honestly prefer it this way because I'm always going to get my 3%, whether it's from my buyer or from the seller. But I think this is much more clear. And it makes more sense to go and log with the offer, because ultimately that's why we were always asking agents beforehand, hey, what are you guys offering? That was going to dictate if the person was going to see the house or not, potentially. So this makes so much more sense to me. I just thought it was funny. Like I said, an agent was dictating it prior. And I was like, well, you haven't even seen our terms yet. So it was weird that he was like already answering on behalf of his seller when there was nothing to even answer for just yet. So I just
and we've had that for a long time though. We've had sellers says, don't bring me no offer that's below X number of dollars, right? And you could say that all day long. It doesn't stop me from bringing that offer because I'm sorry, that's not what we do. Thank you for reminding me of that. We may be wasting our time, but so on and so forth. Just remember too that I have a feeling that we are moving. This is just one more step in the direction of decoupling completely. I do believe that's where they want to go with this, where we're not going to have any of this, that the seller won't. Everything will be depending. If I'm wrong, I'll be the first to admit it, but I believe that's where they want to go with this because they think that's the answer. And I've always said the transparency that we had before was better because we could still negotiate. I negotiated before just because it said something. If that offer came in low, Logan, I guarantee you've had it, right? We come in and make an offer, even though that showed 3% on the MLS. Yeah. They negotiated, said, I'm not going to pay you. I'll do that, but I'm not going to take 3%. Right. So, I mean, it's always been negotiable, but anyway.
But one other point, to what Marissa brought up. Marissa, if you get that question and you're the listing agent to swap positions with this guy, you should be answering the question to what you have signed by the sellers on the listing agreement, which I think he was doing it in just a more forceful manner than he needed to, because that's what he thought he should be doing for the last 2 years. But you're still going to get questions, I think, before you make offers regarding what's the seller offering for compensation. I think agents are still of the mindset that they need to be asking that question, and sort of, rightfully so, I guess, they want to know as much as they can about the seller's position on the house. Right. So you should just be answering that question to what you and your sellers have filled out on the listing agreement. Yeah. But now you'll just have to understand that you may get different numbers on the 220, and you just have to talk to your sellers about that. But you're still going to get the question, I believe. What are the sellers offering for compensation? You just answer it. Oh yeah, we've agreed that we're offering, whatever, 2.5%, 3%, 2%, whatever, and then if the agent says whatever, well, I want this, you just say, all right, we'll put it on the 220. We can talk about it later. Yeah. So you're still going to get those questions.
Well,
Yeah, that's fine. I think it's all just about open communication, and then you just need to be a good negotiator at the end of the day to get what you want, and then it'll all work out. Ultimately, there's so many workarounds, whether it's your compensation form here, or if you get some seller credit actually on the contract that your buyers want to put towards, obviously, part of your commission if there's any missing percentage of it. So there's so many workarounds. I prefer this form much more, but I'll let you guys proceed. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent.
No, it's great. And no, it's very timely and it fits right in. I will say this, and we're going to move on. Understand that buyer agency agreements and listing agreements are very, very important to have conversations about all of this. When you're doing a listing, you need to be talking to your seller about compensation and how that looks and how we view it and what are they willing to do, and understand that even if they're only willing to do this, that doesn't stop people from coming in and asking for more or different things. Just because you want $500,000 for your house doesn't mean that they're going to write you an offer for $500,000. So everything is negotiable, and you have to have these conversations. And the buyer agency, please make sure you're having good conversations with your buyers and saying, this is what I charge. I will make every effort, just like it says, to get it from the seller side. But if I don't, are you willing to pay the difference? And I'm going to do everything I can to get it there, right? And then you can work it out accordingly. But just make sure you're having really good conversations. So let's go on to buyer agent, and I apologize, but that's great.
So the compensation is now an addendum. It is not meant to be a self-standing document any longer. You cannot use this form unless it is attached to one of the 3 documents, the 2T, the 12T, or the 800T. So understand, it can't stand by itself any longer. It is an addendum to one of those 3 forms. I think it's also important to read the language that the compensation by the buyer is for concessions, credits, or expenses the seller has agreed to pay in the contract, if any, and the seller will pay at closing either a certain amount or a percentage of the purchase cost price toward the buyer's obligation to pay their real estate agent. That obligation falls under the buyer agency agreement. Let's remember, you have to have one of those in place to even show a house, an exclusive if you are writing an offer. But buyers affirm that the scope of their agency agreement includes the property, and that the amount in this paragraph is not more than the amount the buyers agreed to pay their agent. So again, if you have a buyer agency for 2.5%, the 220 cannot be more than 2.5%. If it's for 2%, it can't be more than 2%, 3%. It has to match whatever your buyer agency states. Okay, it can't be more than. So if Marissa had a 2.5% and she called Logan and Logan says, yeah, they're offering 3%, she can't magically just get the 3%. She is under contract with her buyer agent for 2.5%. So her compensation agreement should reflect 2.5%. I know you guys are rolling your eyes and gasping and grasping your pearls over here, because I get it. Because before, we could just alter the buyer agency agreement to reflect the same.
Keith is asking a question. Logan, you answered it. Said if seller puts 2.5% on the listing agreement, but you want 3% as a buyer's agent, would the listing agreement have to be updated in order for the compensation to be 3%? Logan says, yes, technically you can update it with the updated addendum, but I believe the 220 will be all the closing attorney needs to see. We don't really know what the listing agreement states if we're representing the buyer.
Okay, but go back to the listing agreement. You had the listing agreement pulled up.
I think right here. No, well, let me hang on. I'm sorry. I'm trying to find it. Yeah.
Okay, now go down to where they're going to offer. Keep going.
Okay, sorry. Right here.
Keep going. We're going to keep going right here. So buyer agent compensation, seller has no duty to offer, but this paragraph asks if they do or they do not. So let's say that they do. And then it says, if the seller does agree, check one of the following. Seller authorizes the firm to advertise blank of the property gross sales price or a flat commission as a credit to the buyer to cover the fee to the buyer's agent. The final amount of any
Yeah,
credit
last sentence.
for a buyer's agent fee will be negotiated, include part of the purchase contract. So I would say that if Logan's seller put 2.5% in there and you negotiate 3%, you don't need to change the listing agreement to reflect 3%, because it says the final amount of any credit will be determined in part of the offer to purchase. So the 220
It's still
in the offer
negotiable.
to purchase would solidify that. So even though they told Logan he could advertise 2.5%, you guys negotiate through an offer for 3%. The 220 in the offer supersedes what he was willing to. So I don't think you need to change the listing agreement.
Yeah, and that's
to
exactly
reflect
what
that.
he said. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what he
Right.
said.
But I
Correct.
wanted to kind of point that out where it, it says it's
Right.
still negotiable fee.
Yep. No, I agree.
Just so we understand too, while we're here, this next box that says firm is authorized to offer compensation to cover buyer's agent's expenses as explained in the firm's attached policy. That is a firm to firm compensation. And John Waite thinks that will go away completely because that's still coupling it. And we're trying to move away from listing firm offering buyer firm
We called it
compensation.
we called it
Firm to
cooperative
firm,
cooperating
cooperating compensation.
compensation.
So as Realty ONE Group Revolution, you are never to check firm is authorized, because we as Realty ONE Group Revolution are negating all possible risk and liability. We will not be participating in firm to firm compensation. John Waite and the North Carolina Realtor
They
Legal
frown on it.
Hotline are all frowning upon this. And I think this will probably be removed at some point, but just so you know, we are not participating in firm to firm. So never check that box and never ask, what's our tax policy? Because we do not have one, because
Yeah.
we're not participating in it.
Because you'd have to have a specialized form and everything,
Yeah,
and
we're not doing
we're
that.
trying to get away from it.
Right, Logan, we're not doing that.
Like we talked about that. Logan said it right.
No, no. Okay.
Hey, Dawn, quick question. Previously we had been, I don't know, I had to step out for a minute, so I don't know if I missed something, but previously we had, when we were doing our listing agreement with our sellers, we had been having them pre-fill out the 220 with what they were offering and having them sign it so that we could send it to buyers agents when they asked for it. Is that still kind of accepted practice, or with this kind of change, are we not doing that anymore?
Listen, John Waite will say you can if you want to, but no, we're not doing it anymore. There's no need. The compensation part of the should no longer be taken at the time you're doing the listing. The listing agreement gives you the authorization to advertise that. So if you call up Barry and say, what are you offering? And he says 3%, he's been given the authorization to do that, but he doesn't have a 220 to provide. That's when you're filling out the 220 now, attaching it as an addendum and putting in 3% based on your conversation. Now, if you come in $50,000 lower and the seller is like, yeah, well, I'll give them 2% for that. That's all becomes a negotiation as part of it. But no, the simple answer to that is no longer get it filled out at the time you're doing a listing.
Doesn't mean you can't.
Doesn't mean you can't.
I did
John said-
just the other day,
John
but I
said
told them.
you surely you can do it, but you do not have to do it. And he, simple practice would be you should no longer be doing it.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and typically it needs to come from the
Yeah.
buyer.
His words exactly were 220 signed at time of listing agreement is no longer needed. That was John's exact words. So I would agree with that.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, because we're just advertising it here. We know that it's going to be negotiated. We're just going to tell when Logan calls me, right? When Logan calls me and we talk about it, I tell him, yeah, they're willing to offer 2.5% upon, depending on the offer, right?
Yeah.
All right. So you want to go back to the 220 real quick, and is that the biggest thing of it?
Listen, it's so simple.
I love it.
So easy. It's so simple. Did anybody have any questions about the new buyer agent compensation addendum? It's no longer an agreement. It does not stand alone.
Yeah.
Any questions?
All right, good deal. All right, moving on. What, where do
Wait,
you wanna
wait,
go?
wait. I got a question because I just, this is what I've been doing and I just want to make sure I can still do it for my listings is when people ask me about compensation, like I have them fill it out that the seller is offering up to 3%. Same thing in South Carolina. And when they ask me about the compensation, I tell them, I say seller values buyer agent, send over the offer with the form 220 and put in what your compensation is. And this way my seller, sometimes they're only asking for 2.5%. And this way my seller's not paying 3%. I kind of just let them come to me with what they're asking for.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sure.
Unless they specifically ask you what the seller is offering, then you should be answering with what you have filled in on the listing agreement. But
why can't I just say the seller values buyer agent, send me your form 220? Like they're not a party to that listing agreement.
Because they've authorized you to advertise that.
In the listing agreement, if you have it.
Well, I'm not gonna, but really in the end, I would put something in there saying, advertise up to 3%.
But it doesn't say it up to. It just says seller authorizes firm to advertise blank.
And it has to be a number.
It's a number. It's not up to 3% anymore. It is 2.5. It is 2. It is 1. It is 3.
But how does that help my seller? Like that does not help my seller at all because they could get by with paying less.
Give me a real life scenario.
They should put less in there. I mean, not necessarily because a seller could come back to you and say, why didn't you offer this agent this? Then maybe the buyer would have paid more if they knew that they didn't have to compensate their agent more. Like there's other factors at play than just saving.
That's a great point, Logan.
Your seller.
But I tell them, I don't say the seller's offering nothing. I say the seller values buyer agent, send me your form with what your compensation is. And we'll lay that in conjunction with the offer.
What I'm saying, Robin, is on the buyer's perspective is if I tell my buyer's agents, oh, she just told me to send over whatever she wants. If we send something less than 3%, we have that on our buyer's agency agreement. You guys are going to have to compensate me for the difference. The buyers might say, okay, well, send them 2.5%. We'll compensate you for the difference. But therefore, then I want to offer X less on the price. Like you're not privy to what conversations they're having with the thing. The compensation has always been an advertised agreement to attract, what the seller is trying to do. So yeah. I think if, I don't think you're going to get in trouble for doing it your way unless it comes out in the wash that people are having these conversations that you didn't know about. But I think if you're specifically asked what the seller is advertising for their compensation, then you should be saying what you filled out on the listing agreement here. If the buyer's agents ask you, is the seller offering compensation? That's a different ask by the buyer's agent. And then therefore, then you can say, yes, my seller values buyer's agents. Please send over the 220.
Well, then I put in 0 right there. And then,
well, then you would put that they do not agree to offer compensation.
Just click the box does
not agree. Don't put 0, just say does not agree to offer compensation. That doesn't mean that they can't change their mind. It says if the seller does agree, check one of the other. So just have them check does not agree. So then the question would be, Robin, is your seller offering compensation? It's no. But I do think that if you're having that conversation with your seller and you're not encouraging them to offer something, they need to understand the risk of maybe not getting potential offers because there are buyers out there that can't afford to pay the full 3%. I don't think there's any disadvantage in saying, yes, they're offering. And if they come and say, well, how much? And you say 2.5% with an acceptable offer.
That's the important part.
I think the biggest thing is to read that whole thing, that seller authorizes firm to advertise blank amount, right?
I never advise them to offer 0, but because what I'm saying is I am trying to get the best deal for my sellers. And rather than me come up front saying, offer 3%, I have been saying to the buyer's agents, send me the Form 220 with your compensation, with your offer, and we'll look at everything together. So that way, because some agents only
But that's not doing what the seller
That's not
seller
what you're
has told you to
contractually
do.
obligated.
Yeah, you're not.
Yeah,
you're
in
not
here-
doing what the seller
Yeah.
said.
Well, I
So you're
got to
gonna-
figure out how to do this because
So-
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's
I
just,
think
Robin, if they ask you if the seller is offering compensation, then you can say, yes, seller's value, buyer's agent, just like you said, please send us.
Yep.
But if they're asking you what the exact amount that the seller is advertising, then I think you should be stating
Yeah. You should be
what is in
stating-
here. And I'm saying is on the backside, if you look at it, it could just be looked in the future as picking one buyer's agent versus another one, this, that, like,
Yes.
as representing the seller, and if things unwind differently towards closing or after closing, and your seller could be like, oh, we should have gone with this other offer, but that agent didn't know we were offering this, and therefore they offered less. Like,
Right.
you
right.
can't
If you're-
figure out how it's going to
you're
unwind. I'm
disclosing-
just saying, if you're asked the commission that the seller is advertising, then you should state what's in here. If you're asked if the seller is offering compensation, then you're not obligated, I don't feel, to tell the exact percentage. You're just obligated to say, yes, they are offering compensation.
They're
Send what's
authorized.
over here.
Authorized,
Be the percentage.
authorized, but not obligated, Logan. That's
Yeah,
the
authorized,
difference,
but
right?
not
Listen,
obligated.
think about this, Robin. When they say they're authorizing us to advertise that percentage, so when you call me and I'm the listing agent, I'm going to tell you that percentage. I'm also going to caveat it with an acceptable offer, because they've told me if a full price offer comes in, Mr. Seller, what are you willing to pay? They're going to
And-
put that in there. I'm
and-
going and I'm going to hold them to it.
And the listing agreement says the final amount of any credit for the buyer's agent fee will be negotiated and included in part of the purchase contract. So that doesn't obligate the seller
exactly
to pay
right.
3%. They could pay 1%. They could pay nothing through negotiation.
Or they could come back and say the offer, and they say real world scenario, 500,000, they offer 450. He comes back and says, I'm not going. You know what? I'll take your 450, but I'm not going to give you 3%. I'll give you
Yeah.
2%.
But the
Yeah.
seller's
Well, yeah.
yeah.
No, I just
So I think-
feel, yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I
Yeah.
get what everyone's saying. I just,
I think that if you took this listing agreement a month ago and they were at $500,000
Mhm.
and they were okay to pay 2.5% at a $500,000 offer, then if an agent calls you up and says, what are they and what are they offering? And you say 2.5%. If they come, then they're okay to pay 2.5% on $500,000. We all know that, right? We all know that. We all know 2.5% on $500,000. If they come in at 475 and they ask for 2.5%, that's when you start negotiating it, right? Well, it's just like you're negotiating the Corvette staying in the garage with it, right?
Yeah.
So all things are negotiable. But I think too, you've got to remember, if you've spoken with the seller and they're willing to pay it and at 2.5%, then you need to advertise that. They can negotiate that up or down through the offer to purchase.
Doesn't mean you
just
can.
have to be.
Hey, you know what,
they understand
Robin?
that.
It doesn't mean that you could say up to. You could say it, even though it says 3%. You could say up to. Like that would be kind of how I would tweak it at this point, right?
well, in the
It-
end, I
it-
almost feel like we should put in like 2.5%, right? And say, it really is going to depend. Like there are going to be so many factors, like how many
Yeah,
days
this
on
is-
market,
sure.
there's just going to be so many things
Absolutely.
that are going to affect it.
Yeah, and I
So
think it's
yeah,
all part of the negotiation.
I think we beat this one to death. So sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you. But no, it's the funny part about real estate, right? You'll find that agents, we all have a unique way of figuring out how we want to present this information, and how we want to work in the best interest of our client. All this is saying is just it's advertising. We're advertising that they're willing to pay, and I would say up to 3%. Right? I would just say up to 3%, depending on the offer. And then you bring me your offer with your buyer agent compensation, and we'll go from there. Because you can always, everything's negotiable all the way till the end. So just remember. All right.
That's fair.
Thank
Thank
you. No, it's great. This is very interesting that you had that workaround and you use that. It's just to understand the contractual obligation. All right. Where do you want to go next?
We're off to the offer to purchase.
All right. Let me go to the offer to purchase. You guys learn anything yet?
So
wait.
No, nothing
50,
that I
50.
would say would be so very top.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
there.
Okay. Let's go into here.
I think the biggest change for the offer to purchase is the due diligence money and when
Yeah.
it's paid.
And the counting.
Do what?
Yeah. And the days,
Yes.
the banking
And
day.
so they have said, and it still says that the
Go to
due
the top.
diligence money is due on the effective date. The effective date is the day the last party signed. So if you presented an offer to Logan today on one of his listings and the buyer signed it today, but let's say that you guys negotiate and you do not get the seller signature on anything till Saturday, that's not a banking day. So then you have banking days, and they even defined banking days because we as realtors in the real estate world, we know 7 days a week. We don't know 9 to 5 jobs in the banking business. So they have defined banking and holiday for you. It's not a calendar day. Calendar days are very different. You have, calendar days in the extension of the settlement date. You have banking days for the due diligence fee. So, but they did define banking days for you. I think the offer to purchase, the forms committee has worked diligently over the last couple of years to move the important information to the first few pages so that we're not having to go
Amen.
back to the back to look and see, are they going to offer asking for a home warranty? The home warranty got stuck and lost in there. So they have moved the home warranty up, I think, to the second page now. So the new offer to purchase, which we do have, the new offer to purchase, the one you're looking at now is the old offer to purchase with strike throughs. That doesn't mean that seller financing, building deposit, and all that's been taken away, or the due diligence period. It just means it's been changed. It's in a different spot now. So I think the offer to purchase.
No, that's the new form. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, the new form. That's what I need. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You need all these?
You just need to find it. Yeah, you're probably gonna have to go up to right
There it is.
So we have a cleaner offer to purchase, first page, and second page. You see seller concessions are now due diligence, settlement date. Okay. And then on down, you'll see the home warranty, escrow agent. So there's the home warranty. So a lot of the information that we used to have to search through 17 pages to find has been moved to the first couple of pages. So easy to find. So they have
Where's it speak
continued
to
to
banking
simplify.
days?
Let's see, banking days.
Where is that located?
It's on defined down in all of the
And all the
rigmarole
other
that
stuff,
you don't
okay.
necessarily want to.
Everybody understand banking days?
Go down and you'll find it.
I'm trying to find. I want to make sure that.
It's gotta be added.
So just need you to understand. I have seen this happen so many times over the years, and we're trying to find some common ground that we're all using. Calendar days. Everybody's like, when does the clock start ticking? Right? Everybody's always asked that, and there's we've had arguments about due diligence and putting 45 days and that's the reason I always said use hard dates.
When does day one start? So
20 is it what 22
page 12 number
section
22 is where they've added the
Okay.
definition of banking
I'll roll.
days. We've calculated calendar days for closings. If you have 7 days, we all know we're given 7 days. Those are calendar days. That means it includes weekends and holidays. So they have defined, unless otherwise provided, and this is the standard language that's been here for a while of this contract, the term days shall mean consecutive calendar days, including Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, whether federal, state, local, or religious, for the purpose of calculating days. The count of days shall begin on the day following the day upon which any act or notice is provided by the contract was required to be performed or made. Any reference to a date or time of day shall refer to the day or time of the day of the state of North Carolina. Okay, not California. A banking day in this contract, which this is new language added, is every Monday through Friday, excludes Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays observed by the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve. Okay, so I'll go back to my illustration. If you have a fully ratified contract on Saturday, you're counting banking days for the due diligence period. That's the only thing in the whole contract that you're counting banking days. Everything else is regular days, calendar days. So the banking days.
So the banking days is only in regards to due diligence.
Due diligence, only in regards to the due diligence. So now the due diligence fee is a negotiated amount paid by the buyer to the seller, and the right to terminate the contract for any reason or no reason at all during the due diligence period. We all know this. So the effective date is when the last buyer or seller has signed and initialed the offer, okay, or any counter offer. So on the due diligence date, yes.
The due diligence fee,
Yes.
it speaks to it. It says no later than the next banking day.
So let's say that it was signed on Saturday, fully ratified on Saturday. You have the next banking day. Now, it's due on the effective date, right? It says, as stated above, the due diligence fee is due on the effective date. The effective date of a contract, right, is
It's
Saturday,
the calendar day in which
but
it was
it's when it's
executed.
signed. But and it must be delivered to the seller no later than the next banking day following the effective date. So we've got new language in here, which might make it somewhat confusing. But just remember, if you have something signed outside of a Monday through Friday, you have till the next banking day, which would be, if it's on a Saturday, you have to Monday. If you have
Unless it's a
Sunday,
holiday.
Monday, right? Unless it's a holiday. If holiday is on Monday, then you have till Tuesday. That would be the date that it has to be delivered. Does anybody have any questions about that? That was the biggest change
As far as due diligence.
as far as due diligence goes.
Let me go back to the marked up one.
Anybody have any questions about that?
They've also added a blank about like if you're going to use Zelle or
Go back to the
what payment type you're going to use, so you can now write in that the buyers are going to Zelle the
the electronic transfer. What does that mean? Is it
Right.
Zelle?
yeah.
Is it wire transfer? Well, they've got a wire transfer. Is it cash
App
Is
or
it
whatever.
Right, that's what I'm saying. They want you to write in there. It's
Mhm.
Zelle. It's I wouldn't use Cash App or Venmo, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. What if your buyer doesn't want to include a due diligence?
Yeah, it's not it's not required.
It's not.
What does it say?
It just says what happens if your buyer doesn't want to include a due diligence fee. They're not required to.
No. So just so you understand, any monetary amount of due diligence or earnest money is not required to make a binding contract. You could have zero due diligence, zero earnest money, and you have a valid contract. Money, paying due diligence fee, and I know agents get this confused. Well, they haven't paid the due diligence fee yet. Okay, well, have you made demand for it? One, you need to make demand. If you do not, and you just go into 2 weeks and you've not initiated a conversation, then that means you're just waiving that, and waiver in contract law is frowned upon, right? Like, and even though you don't really feel like you're intentionally waiving the right to that. So be very diligent if due diligence money is due, you need to stay on top of it and make sure that due diligence money has been paid, right? If earnest money is due, you need to make sure that the earnest money has been paid to the attorney. You're the agent. You need to be making sure that those 2 fee items are being given to the proper people
In the proper
in
time
the
frame
proper
and
time
all of
frame.
that, right?
And if they're not, then as the seller's agent and the listing agent, you need to be helping the seller make demand for those fees. Okay. But no, you can have 0 in those 2 and still have a valid contract. Money does not bind a contract.
And it doesn't change the fact that if there are due diligence dates within the contract, to answer your question, Olga, they still have the due diligence period. They can terminate if everybody's agreed upon this. Now, conversely, if there's a due diligence fee and it hasn't been paid, you need to remember you still have a binding contract. You can get out of the contract if the seller demands and they don't pay. That gives them the right to terminate. But until you do that, and unless you do that, you have a binding contract. We've seen that in the NC Legal Q&A many times, and that is just, you need to understand, money doesn't make the contract, the earnest money or the due diligence fee.
If you have a fully executed contract and no earnest or due diligence fee has been paid, you still have a valid binding contract. And even if they never pay it all the way up to closing, you have a valid contract. You do not have an invalid contract until it's terminated. And you can make demand, a 1-day business demand for those fees to be paid. And then you have a breach of contract that the seller can unilaterally terminate due to the lack of payment, which is what that form says.
Right.
So,
Yeah, two quick points on there is one, yes, everyone should start familiarizing themselves. That demand letter has been out for, gosh, I don't know,
A long time.
like 10 years now,
Yeah,
but
it's been a long time.
I've never seen it used once in practice. You're going to start to see it now used in practice because of how more specific they are getting on when the due diligence fee is to be required. And so if your seller intends to hold the buyer's feet to the fire on receipt of due diligence monies, then you will need to 1 business day after one banking day after the executed contract. If you do not have the money by 5 p.m., then it is your obligation as the listing agent to send the demand letter over to the buyer's agent.
Yeah.
Technically right then at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the contract does not automatically terminate. So just reference that.
Very, very
Get more
true.
familiar
Good.
with that. And then the second thing I'll point out is, as we're seeing more short sales and foreclosures and other types of non-traditional types of contracts, a lot of them are not allowing due diligence fee because those entities don't know how to handle due diligence fee money. So don't let that freak you out in some of those other types of transactions when they're saying like no due diligence fee is allowed to be paid or whatever. So don't let that freak you out.
Yeah, builder's contracts, judicial sales, all that, and that's not going to be a part of those.
Yeah, well, the foreclosures hasn't accepted due diligence fees in forever. Like
they just don't.
There's and now listen, there's a new judicial sale addendum as well that's out there, and I'm not going to get into that, but it's a new addendum. And judicial sales also do not take due diligence amounts, and the judicial sale process is not necessarily controlled by the entire state. It's controlled county by county. So while you may be helping a buyer buy some judicial property in Mecklenburg, that process may be totally different in Iredell County. So if you're not familiar with judicial sales, but you have buyers who are interested in it, as John Waite says, you need to get a buddy. We need to phone a friend because those processes are very different. No different than foreclosures and short sales.
Yeah.
There's very different processes around that. If you've never done it before, you need a buddy. You need a buddy.
Dawn, we're
done it.
I'll do a shameless plug, but I'm doing a training on it in August. I don't know.
Awesome. Good.
Great.
We're actually going to go and observe a judicial sale at Mecklenburg County, and we're going to go
good.
trespass before the sale and go see the property and all that stuff. So for anybody who's curious on how that works in Mecklenburg County, we are going to do one live and in person sometime in August. Just pay attention to Taylor's emails for days and times for that.
And I think as you know, and listen, judicial sales are for a variety of reasons. They're not necessarily just foreclosures.
Mhm.
They come from estate
Sheriff,
they come from
IRS.
divorces, they come from, yes,
Mhm.
taxes, all kinds of things. So that'll be very interesting. That'll be a great one for you guys to have. I think too, the important thing, let's go to page 9 of the
Marked up or the new?
marked of the new one, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go to the new one.
Let's go to page 9. And I think the big thing is, one, if you are a listing agent out there and you are not marking the property under contract until you've received the due diligence money, that is an incorrect practice. You don't wait to mark it under contract till you have the due diligence money, because the receipt of due diligence money does not make the contract valid. You have a valid contract at the time you have full execution. Okay.
What are you looking for?
So the new until the due diligence money is delivered, physical access to the property may be limited or denied. So this would be, it's on page 9. It's under the seller obligation.
This is seller obligation. This is not.
Hold on. Got to find it. He said it was on page 9, but it might be
it's
on
not
a
on page
different
9.
page. Let me see if I can
Section
find
9, maybe?
It's all brand new. Let's
Yeah, what you're talking about is the
Limited
seller
access.
right here. It's access to the
property now.
property. Yeah.
until the due diligence monies have
It's
been
page 9
received.
of
So
the
there's
original. Yeah.
there was a problem that was arising where buyers were putting things under contract. They were sending their inspections or doing the inspections themselves,
Right.
like the next day or the day after, and not
Right.
paying the due diligence
And not paying the
monies.
due diligence money.
Yeah,
Right.
so
Mhm.
they've
Yeah.
added language to kind of curb that practice where you don't really have to let the buyer have access to the property until the monies that are
Until
deemed.
the due diligence fee is delivered.
Yeah, and that's really important for you guys to remember. If you're the listing agent, you're the seller's agent at this point. Part of the reason of this whole tightening of this due diligence fee delivery and the whole, the way that they're doing this is in response to just what Logan said. I've seen this a number of times. We've had many of you agents that have called us going, we got a problem. They're not paying the due diligence, and they're trying to terminate the contract. And what do I do? It's like, well, you can't force them to pay the check, but you need to make them understand that, first of all, they let them in with an inspector or whatever, and they decided they didn't want to do it day after or 2 days after, but nobody's pushing that due diligence. Now it's giving you some teeth as a listing agent representing the seller to say, hey, just so that you know, no inspections are going to be allowed on this property until we get the due diligence fee. Not a foot on this property till we get this due diligence fee. You need to protect your seller. They can go in small claims court and they're always going to win it. There's not been one time yet the due diligence fee did not get paid. If it had an executed contract, I can promise you your sellers will get it. But if you want to save them the trouble, this is how to do it.
But please, Barry, before you say that to the other agent that they're not allowed to have access, make sure you've sent that demand letter for payment, because that's what I'm saying is that is going to start to come into play a lot more than it ever has in the 10 years or so that it's been out. So yes, you can tell them they cannot have access to the property until the due diligence monies are received, but then you better have that demand letter also ready to send them at the same time.
Yep.
Well, and just understand, it's probably been 3 years ago was the first case won for payment of due diligence, and also understand that the earnest money comes into play with some of that as well. So there's case law out there in North Carolina that does support the delivery of due diligence and earnest money and attorney's fees, so on and so forth. So when we have case law, it's already existent. Judges and magistrates go off the case law that's already been established in the state. So it's going to happen. And because people are running in and not paying the due diligence fee, and it's not been long ago when the agents called me and said the seller or the buyer wouldn't leave the $5,000 due diligence money when we went in the day after. And she's like, well, whatever, they can sue me. Well, they most certainly can, and they probably will win. But up until this new forms change, there is access to the property where the seller shall provide reasonable access to the property through the earlier of the closing or possession by buyer. Understand, and we've had this argument too, well, you've already done all your inspections. You can't go in. And John Waite said in his training, remember, reasonable access to the property is through the closing date, right? Not just through due diligence. It is through the closing date. But they have added this in as just a little bit of leverage so that hopefully the due diligence fee will be paid more timely, where the seller can limit access because it's not been paid.
And think about best practices. Moving forward, if you're working with the buyer, what would be best practice? Anybody? And you're going to make an offer on a house. What should you be telling that buyer?
Bring your checkbook.
Bring your checkbook. Exactly, Logan. Bring your checkbook and be willing, because I need to be able to present that with the offer. I need to put it in the mail. I need to make sure, however we get it to them, we need to stop being so lackadaisical about our approach to the money. I don't want to handle it.
Well, 10 years ago when due diligence came into our world, and maybe it's been 12 years ago now, but when it came into our world, we weren't doing so much e-signature. We were meeting with clients. We were getting their WIT signatures. We were grasping and having in our hands their earnest money to take to the attorney's office. We were had in our hands the due diligence check.
A lot of face-to-face.
So we were doing a lot of face-to-face. It's taken this long for the state to come into more of the electronic practice that we seem to have now, and that we don't have those physical checks like we used to. 90% of the time, we probably aren't even touching earnest money or due diligence checks, which is a great practice to get away from. But it does lend to other issues, which we have seen, especially since COVID. So now I think the offer to purchase is finally catching up with those things. But we used to, actually have those checks physically in our hands. We don't have that anymore. The buyer has flew back off to New Jersey and they're going to overnight the check. And you can reasonably allow, like if Logan's buyers have came in and he goes to Barry and says, hey, listen, they're flying out on Sunday afternoon. They can wire or they can execute a certified check from their bank on Monday and they'll get it on Tuesday. I think as long as you're having good conversations and the buyers are still moving forward to get that to you, okay, it's in the mail. You can see you're tracking the certified, delivery coming. You can track it. You've seen it's okay that you've not made demand for it yet because you're all using reasonable diligence to make sure it's happening. It's when that check doesn't arrive or when the buyer's not performing and a couple of days have passed, you need to go ahead and make demand. They can change how they're going to send it from a certified check or a personal check to wire really quickly and get it over to them. So reasonable.
We're just seeing so many ways that people go out of these, try to find a way out of these contracts or paying money and anything else. And to your earlier point, due diligence is not necessarily, it's not required, but it will be if you're trying to buy my property, right? If I'm going to pull my property off the market for a period of time, it's negotiable, but I won't see that money. Now, Logan, to your point about the checkbook, we've seen him stop payment.
Yeah.
Right. We've had agents that brought this to us. They've stopped payment. What do we do? Well, nothing you can do. You can put a demand on it and then you can terminate because they didn't contractually fulfill their duty. I mean, they've breached the contract. So it's not easy because we're not touching these people constantly. And I'm not next door to Logan's office, right? I'm not necessarily, I don't want to have to run an hour with a check, but there's we have to have a part in that process. So don't just sit back and think everything's going to happen. You need to be engaged and in a part of that, watching it, making sure that people are doing what they say they're going to do, and that the contractual portions, the monetary portions of these contracts are happening as they should. I'll shut up, but that's super important, guys.
I think the next change that's most important, go down to number 5. Are you on the marked up contract? Yeah. Go down to number 5.
Or go to 5. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
Fire representative.
So they've added this language that material changes to funding in the purchase of the property that affect the terms of the contract are material facts that must be disclosed. We've had this happen some, and back when the market was a little bit crazier than it is now, some agents and buyers were under the, we're going to offer cash and then switch it to a loan. It's kind of like a switcheroo. And, you know, the statement about funds is just a disclosure. It isn't a condition. It's not contingent upon different things. So now they're saying if you're making material changes in the funding, if you're going from cash to an FHA, that means that the lender is going to want an FHA and VA addendum. This is probably the most recent thing that came across our desk was they went from a conventional to an FHA because of the interest rate. And now the lender wanted an FHA and VA addendum, which is required, but the seller has no obligation to sign that. You can ask them, but they are not obligated to sign the FHA and VA addendum. So the commission are seeing some of these changes in either cash to a loan or the type of loan. So they wanted you to understand that material changes in the funding that affect the terms of the contract are material facts that must be disclosed, because so many times changes in funding and how they were going to purchase were being done by the lender, never disclosed to the seller and the listing agent. So all of a sudden, you know, everybody was like, oh, we're in breach of contract because of the change. And they'll tell you you're not in breach, but it's a material fact that you need to disclose. So if your buyer is changing their funding from conventional to FHA or VA, USD, or any other type from what was disclosed, and from cash to a loan, that's a material fact. You've got to go to the listing agent immediately and tell them what's changed and why, and work through that. So they
Any questions on that?
Any questions?
All right, what next?
Okay. So
Demand for payment.
Demand for payment, we've talked about, it's Form 355, may be used for demand funds from the buyer. That form's been there forever. We've seen it used, and as it will continue to be used many times, but it's there. Familiarize yourself with it. We don't need to go over it. It's pretty simple.
I like this cooperation in electronic transfers. It says if buyer is paying any fee or deposit by electronic or wire transfer, seller agrees to cooperate in effecting such transfer, including the establishment of any necessary account and providing any necessary information to buyer. Buyer shall be responsible for additional costs of any associated with such transfer. That, Logan, is my favorite way to, and I don't necessarily, I never like connecting buyers and sellers, but after the fact, if we're paying due diligence money, I have no problem.
With a wire.
Yeah, with a wire. Like if they want to connect and do a wire transfer, if they don't know what Zelle is or they don't have those abilities to do other ways, I'm okay with that, because all we're doing is facilitating that transfer. Do not be a part of that. Make sure that they communicate directly, because of the wire transfer, the wire fraud stuff. You want to make sure that and that's the one place where I'm okay. We'll let the seller and the buyer communicate, because they need to get that money in a timely manner for this contract, for us not to worry about it.
So the commission and the legal team at NC Realtors, you as the agent should not be providing wiring information from your seller or buyer to the opposite party. You should not be the middleman who's giving them the wire information. The seller and the buyer should speak directly. We actually had an agent called before the real estate commission. She was the listing agent, and another agent brought the buyer, but she facilitated she took the seller's banking information and gave it to the buyer's agent, who then in turn gave it to the buyer, and the buyer paid $5,000 to the seller. Well, so happens to be that the seller wasn't really the seller at all. It was fraud. So they lost $5,000. So one, it was an issue because she had taken a listing and she was slapped on the hand because she didn't do what she needed to do to ensure that that actually was the seller, they had the right to sell the property, which there's some changes in the listing about this conversation. And then she got slapped on the hand because she acted as the facilitator about the wire. So you should never be communicating wiring instructions on behalf of either the buyer or the seller. You should be letting them, hey, buyer, you agreed to pay in the form of a wire. Hey, buyer's agent, our seller and buyers need to talk to share their banking information for electronic and wire transfer. They should be communicating.
Here's their phone number.
Here's their phone number. And hey, by the way, buyer, just beware of wire fraud and different things like that. So, but you should never be a party as to exchanging that information about wiring information and banking accounts. Does anybody have any questions about that? If you're doing it, I would stop.
Try to use Zelle.
It's
QR code, a phone
Amen.
number,
It's
or
so
email.
Please try
awesome.
to use Zelle.
Just
Yeah.
try to use Zelle as much as possible.
What's
It's
the other
Try
one?
to
the
use
seller doesn't want to talk to the buyer. The
Venmo.
buyer don't want to talk to the seller. They can just use a phone number, a name, an email address, and sometimes even a QR code. So
Yes.
Absolutely.
Venmo or Zelle.
Venmo,
I've used them both and
Zelle.
they do work. I mean, they really do. Zelle's
It-
fantastic.
Yeah. And I understand that not all banks communicate with Zelle, like State Employees Credit Union does
Does
not
not.
do Zelle. So I get that, right? So you can find another avenue for working around that. But if it's wires, they're hands off for you sharing that
Yeah,
information.
we don't want to be a party of that,
Don't
right?
be a party to that,
Right.
right?
You're gonna do the deed piece right here, real quickly on
Yeah, I've
paragraph
got it
8.
here.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay.
So the deed to be made to, we are just so used to putting in the name. They've done some revisions to that. It says the deed not is to, but it says may
May.
be made to the following with no assignment being necessary either. And then they have all these caveats, right? So the buyers, that's just the first one on the first page, blah, blah, blah. So, you don't need to put a name in there.
It's
The
only if.
attorneys are not going there to look anyway. If you put something in there, they're not reading it. So, if they have an issue, they will clarify that all before doing the deed. But you
Yeah.
don't have to put that in. Doesn't mean you're hurting the contract if you do put it in. It's just save yourself a couple of minutes to typing in that line because you do not need.
We're
to
used
do
to trying to put it in there
Yeah.
like and how and blah blah blah. We don't have to anymore. Just
Yeah, you don't have to do that. If
Yeah.
you're doing that, fine if you want to waste your time, but you don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the biggest things when it comes to changes in the offer to purchase.
do you want to? Yeah. Okay. That's all of that one.
Right. So in the guidelines to the offer to purchase, there's a few things that you will find helpful. And we have this question over the years, many times. All parties with an ownership must sign as seller, and all parties named as buyers must also sign. Okay. So the seller is married. And again, this is North Carolina. South Carolina is different. Right? So this is North Carolina. If a seller is married, both seller and their spouse must sign the contract. It's even true if the property is owned in only one spouse's name. I think the perfect example of this is Logan just got married, so congratulations, Logan. Now, if he owns property in North Carolina, unless he signed prenuptial or postnuptial or free trader agreement prior to, and have this on record, and then you would still need to speak with an attorney about determining who needs to sign based on that document. Now his beautiful wife has a marital interest in any property he holds in North Carolina. So a non-owner spouse holds a potential marital life estate and a right to descent from the will under North Carolina law. Okay, every state is different, but North Carolina is a marital state. So, and because of that, they must sign the deed in order for the other spouse to clear the title. You cannot have clear title without the spouse signing.
Logan says, you should have told me that a month
I'm
ago.
so sorry, Logan. The signature of the non-owner spouse on the contract will obligate the spouse to join in the signing of the deed. If a married sellers have executed and recorded a prenuptial, postnuptial, or free trader, then we consult an attorney. If you have one of those, you're welcome to send that over to Barry and I. We're happy to look at it and tell you what our opinion is. We're still going to tell you to go see an attorney. But a free trader agreement usually frees up Logan, if he had one in place, to act as if he was
On
not
certain
married,
properties
on
or all
certain
properties or whatever.
all properties.
Right. Yeah.
But in the state of North Carolina, so when you're going to a listing appointment, you should be asking your seller, are you married? Right? I see only one name on the deed. Are you pulling the deed? Are you pulling the deed as the buyer's agent before you write an offer? Barry just had this happen the other day.
Yep.
Pull the deed. Deed has 3 names on it. The disclosure had 2 names on it. Like, we're missing somebody. So what I usually do, and he did too, is, are we going to go look and see if we can find an obituary for the 3rd name? We don't find an obituary. Go to the listing agent. Hey, what happened to Sally Sue? Oh, Sally Sue. I don't know. Well, lo and behold, didn't pull the deed before they did the listing. We got Sally Sue out there. So Sally Sue had to join in the signing of it all. So it matters if they're married. If you have one person on the deed, Sally Sue, are you married? Oh, yeah, I'm married to Joe. Great. Joe needs to sign everything, right? Because he has a marital interest.
What'll get you into more trouble in this business, and we've seen more calls on this than anything, I think, in our time as managers of agents and in our personal dealings as well. But understand that when somebody comes to you and say they want to sell a property, you need to start with a process. Pull the deed, ask them the right questions. And if it doesn't match, you need explanation as to why. You cannot, I can't tell you the number of times we've had problems with this. Like you guys do the basic research and make sure that you've asked questions. Do not accept them at face value, because they may try to be selling it without their spouse,
especially in a divorce situation.
Yeah. I mean,
so, as best practice, if you're writing an offer, you should pull the deed, take a look at the deed. If it has Stephen and Sue on there, but Stephen's the only one signing, you should be going back to the listing agent saying, what happened to Sue? Oh, they're getting divorced. Okay. Then you should be looking for a deed or something that relinquishes Sue's interest. If not, you got to get to the bottom of it. If they're in a nasty divorce situation, Sue didn't sign the listing agreement, but Sue has to sign the deed. Sue may refuse to sign the deed at closing. You've got a dead deal. So you're putting your buyer's due diligence money at risk. Now, I would say that if they paid $5,000 earnest money and the proper people haven't signed the offer to purchase, then, Stephen's probably going to give back the $5,000 earnest money because he can't transfer title. That, to me, that's an issue. So you should be able to get it back, but you may not be able to get it back without suing them.
without a fight.
So let's just kind of do a little bit of digging to find out before you go ahead and let those people. In crazy COVID times, we were seeing ridiculous amounts of due diligence money, $25,000, $100,000. Do you want your buyer to be fighting for $25,000 and $100,000 from a really angry spouse who's refusing to sign because they're going through a nasty divorce? So just do a little bit of research before and find out a little bit about the seller before you go ahead and let them obligate themselves to a large amount of due diligence money that they'll be fighting back for. And I promise you that'll be a NCREC complaint, and you'll be answering to the NCREC as to Barry.
Yeah. Why
So
did
what
you not?
did you do? What was your processes in before you helped your buyer write this offer? Because your obligation to the offer is to, do your best. And this is not your best if you're not pulling the deed and protecting them. So we get a lot of this. We get a lot of people saying, well, I owned that property prior to marrying Sue. And then you need to explain why Sue has a marital interest. And this here helps you explain it. So if you go to the guidelines, that'll give you some talking points for a difficult seller for that. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting thing that they added. If they added it, here's my take. If it's in a guideline, it's been a problem. If it's an offer to purchase change, it's been a problem. It's not just happened to you. It's happened multiple times
Right.
over and over. It's a problem. So they're trying to negate the issue before it gets to a lawsuit stage. So I thought that was a good one.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that?
That's kind of the big stuff on
That's
this
the
one.
big change on the offer.
The home warranty, they just moved it
They
to a
moved
different
it, yeah,
section,
yeah,
really.
They moved it up to
That's all.
page 2, so that's great.
Signatures and dates,
No,
they
they
took
just
all of that
moved.
off there and moved it. Okay. Any other questions on that form? I think we're gonna, I mean, these are the big ones,
Yeah.
and I think the rest of it's pretty quick. We can roll through the rest of them real quick, just so that you have
Well,
an overview of the new forms.
Um,
Do you want
so
me to,
there
do
is
you want me to?
the new construction addendum has had some really good changes and a big update to that. So I think the biggest question that has been, and John even reinforced this, is when do I use, the 800T, which is the new construction offer to purchase, and when do I use the new construction addendum? So are you going to pull that up real quick?
Yep. So the new construction addendum
Yeah.
is, and this is the,
And they've made it really, really easy for you. In the first box in red, it says when to use this form. Use this form with an offer to purchase contract. That's your normal standard Form 2T if, 1, the drywall in the dwelling as defined below is complete, and 2, the seller is a licensed contractor or has engaged as a licensed contractor to complete the dwelling, and 3, buyer does not yet own the property. Use the offer to purchase and sell for the new construction, which is the 800T, if the drywall has not yet been complete, or if an extensive additional improvements still need to be made. So we have that question a lot. So you're going to use the addendum if you have drywall, and you're going to meet the other two, or if the drywall has not been completed, you're going to go back and use the offer to purchase for new construction Form 800T. So they made it real easy for
that's
you.
pretty
Mhm.
cut and dried now. I
Yeah.
mean, it does answer the question, right?
So I think they did a good job of explaining when to use the new construction addendum. They have added some language about the additional improvements like kitchen plans, general finishes, landscaping, allowances, and guess what they gave you? Oh my gosh, a little blank to write in any other additional improvements. Just be very careful what you're writing and be very specific. If you are wanting a specific type of granite countertop and you want that to be installed by the granite top professional installers, then you need to be specific in what granite you're getting, what grade of granite you're getting, and who's going to install the
Mhm.
granite, right? So you have to be specific. So just be very careful with what you write in there. But anyway, they've made the form simpler and cleaner. But more than that, they've given you when do I use this form.
Yeah,
Does
which I
anybody
love.
have any questions about the new construction addendum? Just to hit on that really quickly.
We're good.
Okay.
Moving on.
We have a new
Additional parcel.
exhibit. I think the biggest thing to understand here is at the top of this page, it's number blank of blank. You are to be filling that in. This is 1 of 1 or 1 of 2 that needs to be completed. But you'll use this exhibit if you, I'm sorry, you went too far.
Sorry,
on
honey.
that. If you need to identify parcels, listen to these words, in addition to any property already stated in the contract or listing agreement. Okay. So in addition, so if you have already stated you're getting lot 1 and it's being tax ID number, blah, 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 and here's the address, you don't need to put it in here a second time. You're getting that on page 1 of the offer to purchase, or that's what you're selling in page
Right.
1 of the listing agreement. But in addition to that, you're also going to sell 101 Main Street with a lot number 2 with this PIN number. Then you would put that in your additional provisions addendum there. But you don't need to double put, right? In addition, it's in addition. So it's the other 2 lots, you're selling 3. So lot 1 would be on the first page of your offer. Number 2 and number 3 would be on the additional parcel exhibit. Does that make sense? Just remember, in addition, so
Yeah.
you're not reading.
And it only allows for 2. So if you had more than 2
Then you
additionals,
have-
then you got
You have
another
an
exhibit.
additional, so this would be
One of 2.
And then you would have 2 of 2 that would describe the other lots.
Now, someone came to me one time and said, how can we do that if we have multiple parcels to make it easier? Go see your attorney. Go see your attorney and have them draft an addendum listing the parcels that are to
Well,
be included and attach it as an
But they were
addendum to the
hoping not
contract.
for you to have to do that.
No. I'm just saying that there was a specific one that had multiple lots, like it was like they were buying a partially developed development or something. My point is, this helps with the additional
Yeah.
parcels, makes it really easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Um,
I'll go to the vacation rental addendum. I want to just point out that the seller must now provide the rental agreements to the buyer within 7 days of the effective date. That's a big change. That's a big change. And if you deal with VRBOs and vacation
Where's
rentals
that
that's
at?
being sold, the big change is that it's
Okay,
within
7
7
days,
days of the effective date. It used to say within 10 days after the closing, which is kind of crazy. So now you have to provide that within 7 days. Okay. And then the other big change is the distribution of deposits and rents. Okay. And so this one, you need to be careful when you're writing it in. Otherwise provided here, let's say that you are under contract with a rental agency and that contract has damaging and potential financial harmful language if you cancel that contract and no longer continue to use that rental company because you've sold the home and now the new buyers are not going to take on that rental agency. So if there's going to be any financial costs incurred, you need to think about those things. So just remember that you don't want to have your sellers selling a piece of property that's going to owe $25,000 to a rental agency for breaking the term of their lease agreement. So just, read all of that, the seller.
and there's more Airbnbs and VRBOs in Charlotte. It's not just around the lake. I mean, they're all over.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah. It says rents have traditionally been prorated pursuant to the standard language in Form 2T, and this continues to be the default. But however, the parties wish to outline another arrangement. Blanks are provided. This section also now makes clear that the security deposit and how they are to be dispersed, because that was all kind of left up.
Right.
The other major change is the seller now has a choice on whether they pay any monies to the seller or not if they choose a new management firm. That was the other big change. However, there are major changes to the mechanics in this paragraph. The default is that the buyer agrees to pay for all costs incurred by the seller if there is a default. And the blank in the paragraph has now been changed for a maximum rather than a specific amount or target amount if the buyer does not agree to pay.
Right.
Also, if the buyer should now sign a management agreement with the existing firm by the end of the due diligence period rather than the settlement, they plan to keep the seller's management firm. Otherwise, they may be in breach. So there's big changes.
Right here.
That's 2 big changes. So if you guys deal with any and selling any VRBO, you need to make sure that you read and understand the new changes because those are 2 big changes to that form. And some of you may not deal with it at all, but we do have some. Any questions on that? Okay. Anybody? All right. So I want to go to the agreement to amend contract. You could use this agreement to amend for various things, and you could have 10 of them. So again, I want to mention at the beginning and top, it says agreement to amend, amendment number. You always should put a number in there. If this is the first one, great. If it's the 10th one, it's the 10th one, right? So we're always looking for a number to be put in there. But the big changes for here is that we now can add an additional buyer or seller to the contract. We can also now remove a buyer or seller. It used to be harder to do this, but they've kind of changed it up. So remember that that you can be doing both of these. You can be adding a buyer because the lender needs to add the wife, right? Or you could be adding a seller because someone forgot they were married and now they have to sign.
Oops.
Or, yeah, whoopsie. Or you could be removing a seller or removing a buyer, right? So you could be doing adding and removing. So just make sure if you're presented with this agreement to amend.
This could be people going through a divorce. They develop a free trader during the term of the agreement. Then you can absolutely remove the seller, and that's a quick way to do it.
Yeah. And remember, the lender has to be provided any amendments that you do to the contract.
Yep.
So you have to provide that to the lender,
and the
closing attorneys all have to get this. Okay. So just remember, you could be doing either or in this amendment.
Yep.
Okay. So that's a big change. Then the other thing is the seller shall pay. It used to have a monetary amount. They've put a percentage amount in seller concessions now. So, and then of course, the seller still has to agree to any changes in the buyer. So let's say that we do one of these crazy deals where Sally Sue went under contract, and now Sally Sue's going to assign that contract to Billy Bob. The seller doesn't have to agree to Billy Bob now being the buyer. So you just can't unilaterally assign that contract to someone without the seller consent. So if Sue is now going to be added, and then you're going to remove, so you would be adding Billy Bob, you'd be removing Sue,
but only if the seller is okay with it.
Only if the seller is okay with it. So you still have to have the seller approval for an assignment type thing like that, because the seller, it's not just automatically given that the buyer can assign the contract to anybody they want, not without seller approval.
Does this form get attached to purchase agreement? Which you're talking about this particular form that we're talking about right now, the agreement to amend, Olga?
Neither. It changes the purchase agreement. I was going to just add to that any changes to the contract should be made on this amendment contract that we're talking here. That includes all dollar amount transactions. Just because you have a credit established on a due diligence request agreement,
Great.
that needs to also be on here. You can have it in both places. That's fine. But if you're changing points to the contract, they should not be done on the DDRA. They should be done here. I continue to see people changing closing dates, changing credit amounts, changing home warranty amounts, all that stuff on the DDRA agreements. But they also that they can be on there, and that's fine. But then they also need to be on here. So once you've come to terms on the DDRA, make sure you're also having this executed as well for any like changes to the contract.
If the
DDRA,
the North Carolina Realtor Association hotline will tell you that if it has to do with money, it should never be on a DDRA. The due diligence repair request is just that. It's a request to repair. It's not a request to credit. It's a request to repair. Now, while we see them all the time where we want the seller to remedy these plumbing, this HVAC, this electrical, this, or you can give us a $5,000 credit at closing in lieu of those repairs. And if they sign that, great. The next thing you need to do is go over there real quickly
and do the agreement to amend.
And amend it, right? So anything.
And the home warranties. I see it all
Yeah.
the time. The home
Yeah.
warranty, they say we want
Absolutely.
the seller to do these 5 things and provide a $750 home warranty.
Yep.
That part of the home warranty, again, it can be on the DDRA,
It
that's
can.
fine, but you also need to execute one
Money.
of these as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's almost
Absolutely.
and I would say a
agents don't
best
do that.
practice would add that extra, say, C addendum or agreement to amend, amendment number, blah, blah. If you really want, like, Logan and I are old school, so we're probably going to maybe add that writing into DDRA, which we really shouldn't. I know, but I'm trying my best not to do it anymore. However, you can refer to an agreement to amend contract amendment number 1.
Yeah.
Right. And then it points out all the things, right, that you don't even have to put in there because you're redundant. You're doing it twice. But you could say, and the DDRA doesn't necessarily have to be signed either.
Well, the
The
other
DDR
thing is that the DDRA, you really don't want
Go
that
straight to
going to
that.
the lender or the closing attorney,
You do
right?
not.
No, you do not.
And the problem becomes is at closing, the buyer's agents are asking the attorneys to put things on the Alta, whether they're home warranties or their credits or this, that the lender was not made aware of because the agents didn't execute one of these amendments. So, and then the lender has to then kick the whole entire file back through final underwriting over, like $250 to fix a sink or something like that. And so that's why anything having to do with money needs to be on here. Anything having that might change at the closing table needs to be on there. But it's also just best practice because you don't want the lender or the closing attorney, you don't want to have to share with them the DDRA, because last thing you want is for the lender to require another final inspection of the property to make sure XYZ was done prior to, and they can make that a condition that has to be met prior to closing as part of final underwriting. And you want to avoid that at all costs. And so, just keep the repair stuff on the DDRA and the financial
money
on here.
Yep. And great point too, Logan, is you got to make sure, Don mentioned it earlier, attorney, lender, anything that changes, they've got to know.
Yeah, they just added that in red on here. That's a good addition as well. Yep.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, all parties, including the lender and closing attorney,
And
must be provided.
I think, providing some of this has, it's just that I think agents forget this form exists and what all is on there that they can change, because we still see the last one you can change is the escrow agent, and we do have to change attorneys. That's probably fairly common in today's market. You do have to, so they've made it easy for you to change the escrow agent to another person, blah, 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 who's holding the money, and an easy way to do it as well. So, I think that sometimes agents forget this form exists and that it's there to make it easier for you as well. But that's kind of the changes to the addendum. And the vacant land disbursement disclosure, I'll just hit on that real quick. That's a new form from a
Disclosure?
a disclosure statement. That's a new form from a couple of years ago. You know how we have residential property disclosures, and we have lead-based paint disclosures, and we have the mineral oil and gas rights disclosure, blah, blah, blah. Those are all mandated by state statute and law. This vacant land disclosure is not required by law, but it is required by the form 12T for vacant land offer and purchase. So if you are listing a vacant piece of land, I would suggest you just go ahead and have this disclosure filled out by your seller, because when an offer comes, that's going to need to be attached to that vacant land offer because it's required. It's a requirement within the, so don't misunderstand that it is required by law. It's just required by the offer to
By the
purchase
contract,
itself.
by the purchase offer.
Yeah. They did do quite a bit of revisions to this one. And just like any other disclosures, the seller has the right to mark no representation all day long if they want to. That does not negate your right to disclose if you know something that they're not willing to disclose That doesn't mean that you as the agent do not have to disclose it. So disclosure is still important for the agent. If you have knowledge, you should be disclosing all material facts. And I would say encourage your sellers to be as truthful and honest as they can in filling out this disclosure statement or any other, and not just opt to say no representation. But just so you know, the vacant land disclosure is there. It's been there for a couple of years, not required by law, but it is required in the offer to purchase. So I would think best practice is just go ahead and have it established.
Any questions on that?
Yeah.
We're about to get through it, guys.
I think the next thing, I don't think there's any really huge changes to the buyer agency agreement. No major changes to it. So unless somebody just has a question about how you talk about the buyer agency agreement, it just says, pull it up right there. I think the biggest thing that's been added to this is a red line at the top that says listing service rules mandate a written agreement with buyer before touring a home in person or virtually. So before you even do a virtual showing with them, you must have something in writing. So they put that language in there to help you guys express this to any potential buyers that you have to have something in place so they're not balking at signing it with you. Other than that, the thing that they added the fee for percentage for new construction, that was an addition to that. But I don't think there's really, you can scroll on down through there and see if I don't think there's anything else
Not really.
that changed.
Just the thin
I'll just add on this one. Yeah, the FinCEN stuff, but that's pretty particular. I'll just add on this one in that additional terms or additional provisions on the last page. If you plan on providing any sort of credits, or you're paying for their home warranty, or you're paying for the buyer's home inspection, if you're doing anything like that, with the buyer, please add it in there up front and have it agreed to. It just as agents are crediting buyers, and you're 100% allowed to do that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But see it more and more that those discussions were had in person and never reduced to writing, and then there's disagreements and complications the week of closing in regards to what the buyer thought they were going to receive. And so, that's the place where you should be adding it, as at the end of here.
Well, and I want to go up to number 4 for the fee of services unless otherwise indicated. Buyer agree to pay the firm and check all that apply. It doesn't mean you just check one. Let's say that you have a fee of 3%.
check.
Right.
Right.
And then you have a fee of, if it's new construction,
Right.
for the final cost, that could be 3%, or it could be something different. A bonus of whatever, a flat fee or other. So that's where you could add your brokerage fee if you so choose
That's
to.
what I do.
You can add that in. Again, be specific,
The transaction fee, that's
what
where I
you're-
put that.
what you're putting in there. But just remember that you don't have to check just one of those. You can check all that apply. Logan, I would like for you to speak to this just real quick on the first one, a non-refundable retainer of blank, which will be credited towards firm total compensation. I saw one just a couple of weeks ago that a non-refundable retainer of $1,000 was put in there. Will you tell agents how they're supposed to handle and what that retainer is due at the time?
In
And
terms,
it's also due and payable to Realty ONE Group Revolution, not to the agent. Will you talk to that just real quick?
Right. Yeah, that's the real kicker that comes here. It's just, since it's considered a form of compensation, and so any form of compensation needs to be made out to and addressed to the firm.
correct.
And so, yeah, that's really what happens. In that we see it more on listing agreements, because listing agents are incurring, immediate marketing fees and expenses to list properties. So
Right.
same thing on there. It doesn't matter whether it's on the buyer's agent or listing agreement. Yes, if you're getting a retainer, is considered a form of compensation. And so, yes, then that would need to be, under Realty ONE Group Revolution, we would then just hold that in our commissions account until the closing takes place. And then you would, tell us how to account for that on the transaction report at the end of the transaction. But yeah, any box that you're checking there, really any monies that you receive as part of any of these contracts should be made out to the firm, not the individual agent. But yeah.
Right. And that compensation will be held until the closing. If it doesn't close, Logan, will you speak to
or termination?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. The termination, then obviously the retainer, amount can also be paid. I mean, you're not going to incur the transaction fee. We had a listing where the agent,
you incurred the 10%.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, exactly.
90/10 split.
Right.
Yeah. The 10%, same as a referral fee percentage or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. And that's good clarification so that they understand that.
Thank you. Because we've had that ask and we've told, but I think we don't see a lot of retainer fees, but I think agents
you're going to see a little bit more
savvy. So understand that that's not paid to you, that's paid to the firm. It's held until it's either closed or terminated, and how it's handled and dispersed is processed accordingly. It's based on a closing or termination. So thank you for that.
Yeah, a lot of other states have where it's commonplace for the buyers to pay something to an agent to retain their services. That's then like credited back to them at closing. So I think they're starting to add this language in there because they're starting to see some of that in other states. And now that the buyers are more on the hook for the compensation, I think this stuff, you're going to start hearing and seeing more about this because I think in the next, 3 to 5 years, buyers will start paying a meaningful, percentage of the overall compensation. And so there's going to be more lines like this, but just know if you're getting any form of any of these stuff, just have them make it out to the firm. We're happy to hold it in our commissions account. And like I said, whether it's a termination of a agency relationship, either buyer or listing, or obviously, hopefully a successful closing, then we'll handle that on the transaction form.
Yeah,
and in the same respect, the referral agreement was also updated to make it clear that the prospect is being referred to the firm, and therefore the money is due to the firm, because that wasn't made clear in previous, and I think some people were finding a little bit of a loophole there. So just understand referral fees and that prospect is property of the firm, and therefore any compensation is paid to the firm, not directly to the agent.
Right.
That was the only change really on the referral agreement. The professional services disclosure statement.
Oh, love it. Love it.
Major overhaul of this form. So all of those.
What form is it?
It's right here.
Sorry.
Go up. Right there.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
There's no longer all those little boxes and stuff.
Look how
like that.
good this one looks.
They have removed all those crazy boxes, but for each item below, the client should either select or waive the service with their initials. I know agents love to just skip over this form, and I've explained several times that this form is there to protect you as the agent. It will benefit you well if you're sued for a specific reason. You didn't tell me that I should have a home inspection done. You didn't tell me that I should have had the septic looked at. You didn't tell me. You didn't advise me. You didn't. This form helps you have those conversations around inspections, hey, we highly advise a home inspection, and here's 3 inspectors that I use, and this is why you should have a home inspection. Radon, septic, well, water, whatever. This form helps you have good conversations with your buyers around what that means and why they should have it, and at that time they're opting to select it, and then the provider who is going to provide it, or you put 3 providers recommended and ordered by, You guys can do what you want to,
But so-
but I don't think that any agent should be ordering most of this stuff.
No.
The client should be ordering this stuff for themselves, or that most of the time these are buyers, but sellers do have to fill these out as well.
And can I ask a question? Because I listened to this and I understand it to be a living document. That's kind of what John said, right? Because he talks about it being, you don't necessarily know some of these things as you go through it. So it's a living document. You can go back in and you can go back into that document once you know, let's say, who's going to do, and maybe you didn't know you're going to do an HVAC inspection until after the home inspection, right? So then you put it in there, you have them select it, you put the provider that they chose, ordered by them, and those your initials are in there. It protects you. It's a living document.
You can even have it dated. So like the date of the home inspection,
which is great.
Maybe July 1st, but all of a sudden on July 10th, they decide they need HVAC inspection. You add it, have them initial, put a date by it. So you know that on July the 10th, you added a HVAC inspection into your processes.
Yeah. I think the holdup in the beginning, when this form came out, everybody was kicking back going, well, how do I know? How do I know all this stuff? How do I know all this stuff? And I was always saying, you don't. It's okay if you put in there, it's when you did it, to her point, put dates and checks and keep it live. Because what Dawn and I guarantee you, Logan and Andrea and Allison will tell you is this is probably the most important document that you can get filled out in terms of protecting you and protecting the brokerage. It's because we want to make sure that we've disclosed that these are things that you should have done potentially. And if you choose not to do it,
waived the right to
and they've clearly waived the right, and it will stand up in court every single time. That's the beauty of it. It is a protection.
The only time it will not help you is if you go in to an e-sign platform and you mark waive, and you send it off to them to sign. You know, you need to prove that you did your diligence
That you
as the
explained
agent,
the services.
that you were having
right.
conversations around inspections, whether that's in an email, maybe you have it over the phone, but then you have some type of form email that you're sending saying, per our conversation earlier today, these, you know, are the inspections that you have chosen, and therefore I'm sending you an e-signature for, you know, accepting these inspections. And that at a later date, you may choose to do a septic, a survey,
Right.
a well,
Right.
an HVAC after the home inspection is done. And then if you can take that and the form and go to any court of law or to the commission, you're going to protect yourself.
Yep.
This is what I do. This
Check,
is
check,
how I
check.
advise.
All good.
This is the conversation I had on this day. This is how I followed up. This is how I signed. And this is my processes. And
You're not saying you can't.
It's not your get out of jail free, but it will help you get out of a lot of issues.
Yeah, but if you add a service, you're not saying you can't e-sign it. You're just saying that when I send
yeah.
that, if I send the DocuSign, for instance, I use DocuSign. I know a lot of y'all use DigiSign through it. It doesn't matter. There's a little message piece of that e-sign, right? When I send it, it comes in. It's a part of the record. I send it to you, Logan. I say, hey, Logan, per our conversation today, you decide you want an HVAC inspection. So I've attached, or this is the signature platform that says you are selected such and such as your provider, and this is the date, and you stuff about that covers you.
And then the only other caveat to that would be, I understand that after the home inspection, you may decide that you want to do additional inspections, and we will address
As may be
those
required.
independently.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I
Any
just
questions?
like this form, guys. I know a lot of y'all don't like this form, but I love this form,
Well,
and it's
It
protection.
made it easier.
It is a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
Don't you like it, Logan? I think it's fantastic compared to what it was.
But now,
No, Amanda's laughing even though she's off camera because she knows I hate it, but I don't even the way they've redone it. Okay, it's looks a little bit better, but they don't have boxes to check for not applicable, which 90% of these things should be. You should be able to check an NA box that you didn't have a discussion with somebody about, whatever.
Right.
And I don't like the idea that it's one service, one provider. I
Yeah,
just,
and
Well, it's who they ultimately
don't-
choose.
yeah,
I don't,
think
yeah, I
that-
mean, but it's not, it looks to me when I fill this out, I want to have people sign it, that I'm obligated to provide these service providers one per service for an appraisal, for this, for that. Yes, yes, get it signed. Yes, it does help in defending. I mean, we currently have two disputes going on right now regarding surveys. And the first thing that people go back to and say, the buyer, of course, is always going to say, you told me I didn't need a survey or whatever, right? And like, so yes, there's a tons of disputes that come up in the firm regarding all of these things that are on here, the everything down. I just would prefer it to be in a much different manner, but yes, I mean, they're going to keep adding language about inspections and about surveys because the disputes are just, they're never ending. It seems like with a lot of these things. So yes, I'm saying everybody should get it. Personally, I just don't like the way that it's the obligatory manner in which that, for instance, mortgage loan. I don't like the idea that I am providing them with one name for a mortgage and that it was offered by me and this and that. But that's just me personally. But yes, we need to get these signed, specifically. But if you're not having conversations with people about stuff in here and you don't want to, please put NA somewhere on that line that
I agree.
you're not having it, because that NA is different than waived or selected. I just wish they would have a third line in there.
Well,
you
it's
know,
like that elevator inspection. Not all homes have elevators.
Right.
It's okay
right.
to add a text line under the provider name as this property does not currently have an elevator.
Oh,
It's
just,
okay
yeah,
to say this property doesn't currently have a pool or a spa. It's okay to say not
Right.
applicable to this particular
just saying
property.
NA works.
Right.
Yeah,
NA works.
any works. Like I think, to me, again, that's different than waived, right? Like if I have if there's no elevator at the property, I'm gonna fill in NA. I'm not gonna have them initial waive, because I'm not saying that they waived it or not. I'm just
He's
saying,
right. That would be an approved.
And I will
Yeah.
say too, I'm not giving, like, if you don't suggest any lender, that's okay. You don't have to give them a lender. You can say they've selected and their choice provider is Wells Fargo. So they're telling you, I've chosen Wells Fargo, and that's ordered by, the
by them.
buyer, the insurance. You're not telling them who to use as insurance. You have the conversation. Who are you going to use for your homeowner's insurance? Right. Okay. I'm going to use Erie. Fine. You put Erie in there and it's ordered by them. But I
Ordered by, I think the reason I call it a living document is I don't, there's nothing I'm giving them that goes on there. It's only when they decide. They choose, like I've got the email I send them for home inspectors, and I say, here are my closing attorneys. Or, we've had a conversation about closing attorneys. The contract says we use this one, however they do that. And if something is added later, I add it, right? Or if they change something, I let that be the kind of the living document that once they've made that choice is when I start filling in the blanks.
Yeah. Listen, agents are most typically like Logan. They hate it. From a risk management standpoint for the office, and for yourself, it's a great tool to help you get out of jail free.
Well,
and it can be.
it can save you a lot.
I understand it's a real pain, but nonetheless, it's still and I think it's okay. Like on the appraisal, of course, they're going to have an appraisal if they're having a loan. So they're going to select it. Provider name, it's okay to say unknown to be ordered by lender, right? No one has control over who that is. Not even the lender has control over who the appraiser is going to be. So everything within, also common sense.
All right. Well, I think we've thoroughly
Any questions about
covered.
that? Okay. The last thing, we're going to go to the listing agreement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well, we were already there.
no, we haven't went over it right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
We need to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, we just have a few highlighted things
I know it's pretty easy. Y'all hang with us. We
on-
want to get through this with
on
you.
the listing agreement. So we need to talk about the distribution of marketing. That's probably the biggest changes is
Right
the
here.
distribution of marketing. So your sellers are going to initial that they are going to market the property public marketing, which is most publication. Right? Okay. Or they're going to do limited distribution or exposure, meaning the property is to be marketed to clients of the firm and the brokers. This is kind of like answer me this. Do you all know of any MLS that's not going to allow limited distribution that you guys are a part of? Logan, do you know?
I don't.
Well, I mean, they're adding this in here for the Compass Zillow dispute, the
Right.
lawsuit that's currently going on between Compass and Zillow. This is
Right.
essentially that just speaks to that. So
Yeah, and there's certain MLSs that are not going to do limited distribution. Like that will not be an
Yeah.
option for you to choose, no matter if your seller wants it. The MLS will not allow it, right? So there are going to be MLSs that do not allow limited distribution. Or then we have the office exclusives, which is, they've always been in there, but you've got some different language. But the limited distribution or exposure, that's brand new. But they're going to sign an initial one of these, not all of these. They are initially one marketing option. We shouldn't see initials on anything but one. And most of the time, it's going to be the first one.
Yep.
Because we all know that the most exposure and the most effective is open marketing.
Yep.
So we're mainly going to look for public marketing, but there is that limited distribution that's there. I don't foresee any of you guys using it, but we're only looking for one of those to be marked. Okay. All right.
They do a disclosure. It says seller understands that some listing service benefits will be waived or delayed if seller chooses office exclusives for limited distribution or exposure. These benefits include may not be limited to broad and immediate exposure listing through listing service. If they're doing this,
if
seller
they are
confirms.
they're opting for either of the latter two, the limited or the office exclusive. You should be reading this paragraph to them verbatim. You should be going over this paragraph. If they choose the first option, don't bother. But that is a disclosure, right?
Yeah.
The next big thing is they have added 7B as an unrepresented buyer now has a box, right? So percentage of gross sales price if the buyer is unrepresented. So again, firm's fee, seller agrees to pay the firm the following. Check all that apply, all of them.
Just like the other.
Like the other. So you can check any of it, but check all that apply. So now you have a specific unrepresented buyer because, we all know that we work just as hard for unrepresented buyers as we do those that you're going to represent under a buyer agency.
Hey,
that amount should be higher than the other amounts on there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And, used to be, I don't know about anybody else, but I used to write it in under other. I did. Like if it's an unrepresented buyer or if I'm handling, both sides technically, or if the buyer's unrepresented, I just like that box is checked and we can add a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that. And then of course, then they talk about they rewrote C here. It's about buyer agent compensation. Seller has no duty, right, to offer compensation to an agent. They just rewrote that. Correct? They just rewrote that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that whole section just got rewrote.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it.
Well, and again, it goes back to
authorize
they're making it more clear that it's the seller that's offering the compensation, not really the firm, which we've been practicing for 2 years.
Yes.
But
yes.
and then I think I put it earlier in the chat, but please fill in that D total cost. They added that, I believe last year in 2025.
Last year,
For some reason, I think that might've been like the only thing they did last year, but, that's just so helpful for sellers to realize that
Yeah,
if
I
the
agree.
buyer has an agent and you're their listing agent, what is the total compensation? Because for 22 years of doing this, it's always been, it still is confusing where they fill out your compensation, which is the total, then the buyer's comp, and then is one subtracted or are they added? So just fill in that total comp line, assuming that the buyers have an agent as well, with what the seller is anticipating that to be at the beginning. Again, as we went into earlier, that is probably and can change once the 220 comes into play. But just at the listing, it's just good practice to just fill in that total amount there so they realize what the total amount is. And, you know, obviously it can change, but it's just, they snuck that line in there without ever really like announcing it or saying anything about it. And I just think it's been super helpful. And I get a lot less questions from sellers about, wait, is that plus this or subtracted from this or that? You know, they weren't having a hard time understanding that before. So that really clarifies it.
Yeah.
Okay. Devil's advocate real quick on that. Just asking a question. And so in this line here, percent of the property's gross sale price. So let's just say we're gonna list for 2.5%. If the unrepresented buyer is
3%.
3%, right? Like you said, more or
Yeah.
4, whatever you decide, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, then you have, if it's 4% and 2.5%, you're putting 6.5%
Down
on
there. Okay.
because that would be the total that they would pay is 6.5% if you are representing them
Well, no, I
as
would,
the listing, and if you're representing an unrepresented buyer, you're getting
Well,
that in
I
addition
would-
to.
if you're saying if you're checking the second and the third boxes right there, you're
Yes.
checking the second and
Yep.
I'm saying I would put the total amount of the second box that you check there and plus the total amount that you put down at the top of the next page. Yep. And then whatever you fill in here,
Oh,
Well, I'm atop of what.
oh, do you
page?
mean here? Yeah, no, he means buyer agent
whatever you
compensation.
fill in
You're
here.
adding that as
So
well.
if you check
Yeah,
a
and
box
that.
there and fill
if
in that
there is
percentage,
something,
seller authorizes
yes.
firm to advertise blank,
Yep.
whatever that blank is there, plus
Yep.
whatever's in the second blank above, I would be putting that down there as the total.
So the worst case scenario, meaning the most that they would possibly pay based on the whatever boxes were checked above, right? If it's 2.5 and 2.5 is
Yeah.
5, 2.5, 4, and 2.5, that'd still be 5.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's
So worst
what
case
I think
scenario
is.
basically is how you would handle it. Okay. So what he's saying is, Mr. Seller.
I understand.
Okay.
But if
Thank you.
you are going to try to if you're going to try to grab and you want payment for unrepresented buyers,
Would I?
Then it would go down, in
I
our
would
example
include that
there,
language.
go down from 5 to 4, because that's what you put in box 3 or whatever.
right?
So with D, total cost optional in that instance would be, let's just say 4% if buyer unrepresented, 5% if buyer is represented, right?
Yeah, I guess you could fill it in that way. I was planning on just putting the 5 because I just don't think if you went down to 4, anyone's ever gonna.
They're not gonna fuss.
You're not gonna have you're not gonna have trouble with that. But
They're not going to complain
That's
about
true.
a less number.
in
It's
your
the more number
example,
they don't like.
yeah, in your example, they're gonna see. I think you said 2.5 in the first box and then 4. So in your example, they're gonna see a total of 9 if they add up all the numbers, and
Mhm.
because they're going to see the 2.5 plus the 4 under it plus another 2.5 here, which all adds up to 9. So in their head, they're like, wait a second, we never talked about 9%. And you're gonna be like, no, total.
Then you have to go back and read.
Most likely gonna be 5, 2.5, and 2.5. That's why I put 5 in here. If the buyer doesn't have an agent, well, guess what? Then we go back to this box up here. It's 4. But the problem is they're going to end up adding up all the numbers in their head, and that's not really that clear to them. So that's why I use that box.
Well, and honestly, and guys, thank you for everybody's hung in here with us. I will tell you, I sincerely believe that the compensation conversation on both the buyer side and the seller side could almost be a workshop in itself. And how do you do it? How do you add to it? How do I do it in real world? How does Logan? How do other people do it? Maybe we can learn from each other. This might be a really good topic for us to have this, so we learn how to have these conversations. I can tell you how I add the transaction fee to all my buyer agency and listing agreements now. And I can tell you how I word that. I think that'd be a great future maybe
Training.
workshop for us to do.
Yeah.
And we could all sit in and everybody can learn how we have these conversations. Because it's an uncomfortable conversation, but it needs to be clear, and we need to be able to express it well.
Yeah, let's add that. Plus, we'll on the same training, we'll cover that, and we'll also cover due diligence and earnest money and why they should be separated and not together, and how people write different page one of the OTP, and how different people do it for different reasons, and we can discuss both of those things. How the compensation is on the listing agreement, and then also on the offer to purchase. Different strategies for basically for the first page of it. But yeah, that's what we'll get that on the books for, I don't know.
Yeah,
whenever.
just compensation and other strategies with buyers and sellers, right? Keith said below the class on how to go about compensation conversations, especially conveying value as a buyer agent. Absolutely. I think that it never hurts for us to refresh our memory as to how we are expressing our value proposition as agents. Part of it is doing exactly what you've done today, guys. I can't tell you how important that is.
I just have one final comment.
Sorry.
Dual agency is still allowed in the state for now. So you have the same dual agency language in the listing agreement that you've been seeing for a couple of years. This was also changed last year. So none of that changed. So dual agency is still allowed for now. I'm sure if you guys read any of the
unless you have an ownership interest in the property,
right, you cannot.
and that comes into play. If you ever read the bulletin, I
Yes.
guarantee you 15% or 20% of the people are practicing some form of dual agency, whether expressed or implied, and they have an interest in the property through an LLC, and it's on there every single month. I will also say on this thing here, I'll speak on Amanda's behalf here for a second and just say, SkySlope automatically brings up boxes to be checked in all of those blanks. That is 1000% incorrect. You cannot be checking all of those blanks. And so even though SkySlope already has it filled in, SkySlope is filling in things automatically, not because that's the right way to do it. You need to read these things and decide, or the buyer can also have them be optional on there or whatever. But if you send them all the signature blanks over there to your buyer and say, hey, please fill this out, they are going to check every box because they think that's what you want them to do. And it is not, in fact, right there. SkySlope usually by default should be making them optional boxes, but your clients, your buyers and sellers don't understand optional boxes in DocuSign or DigiSign or whatever you're using. And so, yes, the checking all of these boxes is never correct. It will never, ever be correct.
It will.
Not all of these lines here they should never be all selected. So
it plainly says initial only one line below, but your sellers don't understand that. That's
your buyers and sellers don't know.
Yeah. And you can override some of that on the forms. You can override and take those boxes out before you send it, so that'd be less confusing maybe if you override
it.
But for now, dual agency is allowed still in the state. I know if you guys read any of the information coming down a couple months ago, it was proposed to do away with it. Not saying it's not going to come, but for now, it's still there. And
it's going to get switched to a mandatory designated agency state eventually. I mean, eventually. You can't do away with full dual agency because you got firms with thousands of people. They have to be able to do business together, but it'll go to where designated dual agency is the default.
Yeah.
And then these small mom and pop 1 agent, 2 agent firms, they won't be able to practice dual agency because they won't be able to designate somebody else that's not it. But yeah, they've been talking about that for
the last thing is number 13, and it's in red, and it says the seller must provide valid identification at any time upon request and affirms that their identification is current. Seller confirms that they have the legal right to sell the property. So I don't know. We made uploading valid ID in SkySlope mandatory several years ago. But this is all part of the rampant scamming that's going on. And now we've even experienced fake IDs that are out there. So if you guys are in tune at all with what's going on, they're crazy is they're grabbing your voice from voicemails that they can find, videos you may have put out there, and then they're AIing this message that sounds like you. So it's crazy at the amount of schemes that are out there, but the state knows that it's there. They just hope that you guys are doing your best to prevent fraud and scheming as much as you possibly can by obtaining a valid ID. That's one way you can say, hey, I got their ID. I'm sorry that it was fake, but I did obtain, or at least attempt. I did have a video call with them. Their face did match the ID that they provided to me. So they're talking about doing Zoom. Anything else you want to add to that, Logan, that you guys are sharing with agents to help prevent especially dollar scam and fraud?
Yeah, I mean, we did have an agent that this happened to. Unfortunately, the scams appear to be around land, and they're contacting saying, I'm an out of town seller. I live in California, but I got these lots I want to sell in North Carolina. Can you help me with that? And then the agent goes to the lots, tells them the comps, do it. They get it under contract. They get the due diligence money,
And then they're gone.
they're gone, and you can never contact them again. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's unfortunately or not. It's unfortunate for us, but the courts have found in favor that the agents were negligent or derelict in their duties to figure out who the seller was, and if they were an entity seller, verify that this person was the entity. That just more of that's going to come into play, because it's just more of these scams are coming into play about these people listing it, and they tell it, they know the name, because think about it, they can find the names on the tax reports, they can do all, I mean, it's real easy for them to do, and they'll have an email address that is at Gmail, that's the person's name that also matches the tax records, and and they claim to know a lot about the property, and they're you probably looking at it on Google Earth, and they're they sound like they know what they're doing. And which is the part I feel the worst for the agents, because they talk about specific conversations that they had where the seller really knew about the property and the lines and what was next to it and behind it and all this stuff, and knew when they bought it and how much for, but it's unfortunately on the rise, and agents are being held. This agent that I'm referring to, the property was in South Carolina, but it's the same in North Carolina. And they put a judgment against the agent. The buyer put a judgment against the agent and the firm for the amount of due diligence that was paid. And yes, that agent had to work to return those funds to the buyer from the agent's own pocket, again, on a transaction that the agent did not get paid on also. So it makes it doubly painful for everyone involved. So yes,
I will say that some of the attorneys are suggesting that as the listing agent, someone reaches out to you. One, you guys have forewarned, so you're able to get a hold of phone numbers. Of course, there's addresses. The mailing address at the tax office may be different than the address of the property. So the attorneys are saying, hey, if you don't know, you can contact us, because they have some software that helps with the fraud as well. You can have forewarn that can help you. They're suggesting that if someone reaches out to you and you've never heard of them, I found you on Google, blah, blah, blah. There's some keywords that's like too good to be true type things.
Oh, yeah.
And then they are saying, take the address, that's the mailing address for their tax bill, go ahead and send them a letter in the mail stating, hey, this is my name, this is who I'm with. I had someone reach out that says, and you said you were potentially interested in selling your property, and I'm following up due to recent scams and different things. And if this is really you, great. And if it's not, hey, someone's trying to sell your property. And the attorneys are actually sending the same letter. We had this happen with Barry's. Most recently, he has property listed here in Allegheny. The agent or the attorney here emailed directly to the seller to say, we understand that you're under contract to sell your property. Here's what we need. Here's your information. And it's happened more than once. The seller will call the agent who sent the letter or the attorney that sent the letter and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not selling my property. I don't know what this is. I don't know what you're talking about. So they're saying that sending letters in the mail to the address provided with the at the tax office can help prevent the fraud too. And again, they're targeting vacant land a lot.
Yeah.
So that's just one thing I've been hearing the attorneys talk about doing as just one more step to protect yourself. These scammers are pressing you. I've got to get that listed this week. I need you to do it this week. It has
Or if
to
the
happen
price
this
is too
week.
good to be true, that's the
Right.
biggest one.
The urgency is there, so that they're pressing you to do it. For some reason, they give you a reason. I've been diagnosed with cancer. I've had my husband die, whatever. So they're pressing you to do it urgently. It's urgent. So they're not giving you the time to send those letters, to do the research, and to make the phone calls to establish if they're real or not. So
Yeah, and even the real savvy ones are one of the agents that I talked to about this last year. The people had actually gone after a land listing that had expired like 5 months before or whatever. And they called this agent. And so he went to MLS, saw it expired, for, I think it was like 300. And now they said they wanted to list it for 250. He was like, yeah, that sounds great. He goes out there, does their thing. And I'm thinking, man, they would have got me with that one also. I mean, it was an expired,
Yeah.
land listing.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
Just really have to beware about, doing everything virtually, because it opens ourselves up, has so many benefits, but it opens ourselves up to scammers and fraudsters that are even, as savvy or more savvy than half of our normal clients. So
Yeah.
just beware. But yeah, let me just take this time. I know some people were jumping off, so I wanted to put something in the chat, but we're happy to open this up for questions. But before people start jumping off, I just wanted to really, say thank you to Dawn and Barry for not just for doing this today, but also just for spending the time and effort to actually learn these things and read through these things and understand how they apply to us. I learned several things today myself, and some other things I want to go back and look at again. So yeah, just really thank you guys for the time and effort and obviously doing this today as well. And wanted to thank everybody for hopping on here. I think at one point we had 30 something agents on here,
Right.
which is great. And yeah, we've got for those of you that were in the Gold Club, I know a lot of you are on here today. We are getting together tonight at the original Suffolk Punch in South End. It's I bring it up mainly because it's the largest Gold Club group that we ever had. And so I think it'd be awesome to get, all those people together tonight and celebrate. So, you check your email from Taylor, or it's a calendar invite that she sent out. Check that for the specifics of the address and, times and all that good stuff. But that's tonight. So I just wanted to remind a lot of you that I saw on here that hope to see you out there and celebrate, what I think was probably a surprisingly good Q2 for a lot of us. So reason to celebrate and let us know if you have anything else. But yeah, I think we can open it up to now for a couple minutes. If anybody has questions on any of the things the changes to the forms.
Questions or comments
today. And also invite Amanda, if you saw anything today that you think anybody is going to be fouling up on a regular basis, that you want to save yourself, sky slope notes back to them in their files. If anything triggered you today, feel free to bring that up as well.
No, I'm good, thanks. But I do want to just let everyone know who's still on here that any changes here to form names or uses, where they're used, when they're used, will be updated in SkySlope. Just give me a little bit of your patience to get it there.
I will say too that the forms are available for use now, and you absolutely should be using the new forms. You have 60 days, so you have till September 1st. I don't know when Amanda's going to start rejecting the old forms, not now, but you should not be using them regardless if they're available to you. You should not be accepting an offer to purchase on an old form at this time. You should be using the new form and only accepting that as well. But you do have 60 days. The 220, the old 220 doesn't even exist out there unless you saved it somewhere. It's not available in zip forms. I don't know about SkySlope forms, but you should be using these forms now. You should not be delaying.
Yeah, and SkySlope automatically updates. If you have an old form in a folder, there's a link at the top where it just says the new form is available, and you click update now, and it'll immediately pop down the updated form. So you don't need to do anything in SkySlope forms. All of these forms are in there. Like I said, if you're working in an old folder that you downloaded some forms into before, and you want to fill those out, you will be provided with a link at the top to use the updated form instead. And you should obviously start doing that now and going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner you start using it, the better you get and the more proficient you get at applying it to your daily business. That's what I will say.
Yeah.
I want to just thank everyone that's still on here. Of course, I'll go on later and thank everybody on the Facebook group and our circle. I really appreciate all you guys that invest in yourself the way you do and learn these things. I can't stress how important it is. If you want to be the best, right, you need to strive to be on top of it and be as knowledgeable and professional as you can. And this is just one of those things. And I know Logan and the team, the owners and the managers, we appreciate that because we know you guys that are still here are not the problem children. Probably the ones that are on here during this thing aren't the problem children. You have questions that doesn't make you problem children. When we have problems, that makes you the problem children. With questions, we welcome. Problems, we prefer to avoid as often as possible. But thank you so much. Anybody else want to say anything before we go? You can unmute and just say bye. I don't care. But if you have a question or anything, let us know because we're about ready to wind it down. Chloe says hi.
Thank you. This was so informative. I really appreciate it. Have a good day.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
We appreciate it.
All right, y'all. Have a great one.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.